starting the live stream.
Okay, live stream is up. At this time, will sergeants please start their recordings?
PC recording started.
Recording to the cloud all set, and good morning, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Transportation. At this time, would all council members and staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. We are ready to begin.
Thank you for joining our virtual hearing today on transportation equity. First, I would like to acknowledge my other colleagues who have joined us thus far today. We are joined by Councilmember Stevens, Lee, Juan, Williams, Ariola, Lewis, Narcisse, Kagan, and Carr. I'm going to turn it over to our committee counsel, Jessica Steinberg-Albin, to go over some procedural items.
Thank you, Chair. I am Jessica Steinberg-Albin, counsel to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the New York City Council. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called. I will be periodically announcing who the next panelists will be. The first panelist to give testimony will be Ydanis Rodriguez, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation. I will call you when it is your turn to speak. For the question and answer period only, we will also be joined by Eric Beaton, Deputy Commissioner for Transportation Planning and Management, Rebecca Zack, Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Julia Kite Laidlaw, Director of Safety Policy, and Azakiwi Rich, Director of Performance Management. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or a specific panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, which includes the time it takes to answer your questions. Please note that for ease of this virtual hearing, we will not be allowing a second round of questions for each panelist. Thank you. I will now pass it to Chair Brooks Powers to give an opening statement. Chair.
Thank you for that. One moment. So thank you again for joining today's transportation and infrastructure hearing on the topic of transportation equity. For too long, the council and the city's transportation conversations have focused on communities, both geographic and otherwise, that are transit rich and best able to navigate our city streets, sidewalks, waterways, and subways. Today's hearing is the start of a new chapter. Under my leadership, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee will focus on communities that have long been left out of our critical transportation and infrastructure discussions. Transportation equity sounds like an ambitious topic to tackle in our first hearing, and it is, because equity in transportation means many things. Equity in transportation means addressing the needs of neighborhoods that have suffered from long and dangerous commutes after decades of underinvestment. But it also means making our streets and public transportation accessible for people with disabilities, ensuring our children are safe going to and from school, promoting the use of minority and women-owned businesses when we allocate our transportation dollars, and focusing on improvement, not just enforcement, when we tackle dangerous driving. Fundamentally, transportation equity means listening to the needs of all of our communities and prioritizing those people and places that need our efforts and resources most. Many of the challenges we will discuss today are issues that matter citywide, and I'm excited to tackle the issues that all New Yorkers face. But it's also important that we remember how these citywide issues disproportionately affect some more than others, and question why that is and what we can do to change that. One example of that is street safety. All New Yorkers suffer when our streets aren't safe, and no council district is immune from the impact of traffic deaths. But because of a lack of historical focus or investment from the city, districts like mine, the 31st District in Southeast Queens, where more traffic deaths occurred last year than anywhere else in the city, see more of our friends and families hurt and killed on our streets and sidewalks. The same situation holds true in other districts, from the Bronx to Staten Island. And these disproportionate effects aren't limited to issues of safety, as the data shows that the same holds true when it comes to traffic pollution and lack of accessible infrastructure and other problems. I also want to make sure that when we are addressing these big issues, our city agencies are responsive to the individual needs of the communities they are working in. That means taking community input seriously and understanding that one solution will not work for every block in the city. As chair of this committee, I will work to make sure all of our community's voices are heard. I'm excited to question the Department of Transportation on their plans for tackling these challenges and on how the council can collaborate and push them to do better. I'm also happy that we have advocates and members of the public here today, and I look forward to hearing their proposals for issues this committee can be doing as we move forward. Finally, this hearing is only the first step in an ongoing conversation around transportation equity. On March 16th, we will continue the conversation as we bring these questions to the MTA as a part of our preliminary budget hearing, where we look forward to hearing directly from MTA Chairman Janno Lieber. Now we will hear testimony from the New York City Department of Transportation. I will call on our moderator to call on the witnesses from the administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. We will now call on Commissioner Rodriguez of the Department of Transportation to testify. Before we begin, I will administer the oath. Commissioner Rodriguez, Deputy Commissioner Beaton, Assistant Commissioner Zach, Director Kite Laidlaw, and Director Rich. I will call on each of you individually for a response. Please raise your right hands. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before these committees and before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Rodriguez. Deputy Commissioner Beaton.
Thank you.
Assistant Commissioner Zach.
Thank you.
Director Kite Laidlaw. Director Rich. Thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Bruce Power and members of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. I am Danis Rodriguez, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation. With me today are Eric Beatton, Deputy Commissioner for Transportation Planning and Management, Julia Kite Laidlaw, Director of Safety Policy, Asidwe Rich, Director of Performance Management, and Rebecca Sack, Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Community Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of Mayor Adams and on DOT commitment to transportation equity. First, I must say that it is an honor to be before this committee, where I served for 12 years on the council and 8 years as a chair of this committee. And even more, I am so happy that my first hearing in this role is on equity, a topic that is so important for the chair, for me, and for many New Yorkers. I want to express both my and Mayor Adams' strong belief in creating a more equitable city that guides all our work. The positive benefits of our transportation investments must be available to all New Yorkers. As commissioner, I'm determined to focus our investments in low-income neighborhoods and community of color, neighborhoods that have received less investment historically and have been left behind. If there's a progress in underserved community, the whole city will benefit. DOT's vision for racial equity is a transportation network that meets the need of all New Yorkers, regardless of race, ability, or economic status, in a safe, efficient, and sustainable manner. Our vision of transportation equity means that demographics such as race, income, or language will no longer be able to be used to predict transportation outcomes. Our vision also includes a transportation system that is more accessible for people with disabilities who are also a majority people of color and have a higher poverty rate than people without disabilities. Every New Yorker should have multiple travel options that are safe, reliable, and affordable. Our transportation investments should improve access, safety, health, and quality of life. Additionally, New Yorkers should be informed and empowered to shape transportation in their neighborhood. All people should be able to move freely and peacefully in New York City without fear of injury or death, regardless of their background. And all New Yorkers should live in a safe, healthy, and resilient communities that can thrive in the face of climate change and economic uncertainty. DOT is continuously evaluating our agency's process to bring equity in transportation to the forefront, and we have identified a number of areas to equity in our work. As we have long known, complaints-based process empowers some communities more than others, and political influence can speed up or slow down projects. That will change under Mayor Adams and my role as a commissioner of DOT. In the Vision Zero era, DOT has prioritized safety work based on crash data. The Vision Zero Borough Pedestrian Safety Action Plans use fatality and injury data to identify locations that disproportionately account for pedestrian fatalities and severe injuries. And then the agency focuses safety interventions in these areas. Following this data has been an essential part of the agency's Vision Zero strategy, informing street improvement projects, traffic signs, and signal installation education, and strategies communication campaign, and more. Going forward, however, the agency will also factor in equity in determining where to make our street redesigning investments. As laid out in the New York City Street Plan released in December 2021, DOT is now starting to add an explicit equity lens to our work. This includes focusing our investments in areas that need it most, engaging communities proactively about transportation in their neighborhood, and making the city more accessible to all. The plan lays out priority investment areas that will help focus our investments to where they can have the greatest impact. PIAs are based on three inputs: race and income, density, and lack of priority investments. You can see the map of the PIAs included in the testimony. DOT will continue to invest in community across the entire city. But going forward, street design investments as a whole will be prioritized in higher need neighborhood based on the PIA tiers. while still being guided by data such as crash histories and a slow bus speed. You can see an example of how we will overlay our Vision Zero priority corridors, intersections, and areas with the PIAs in the map included in my testimony. The PIAs are one example of work the agency is undertaking to further equity, and there are other ongoing efforts. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic that disproportionately harmed communities of color and the racial justice uprising in the face of the violence against Black Americans, DOT created the Equity and Inclusion in Planning Working Group. This internal working group's purpose is to further expand on the agency commitment to improving transportation outcomes for communities of color and ensuring that communities across the city have safe, reliable, and well-maintained street-level transportation infrastructure. The working group recommended developing the priority investment area, as well as other measures to consider equity in our work and strengthen community engagement. And in 2019, DOT began a structured hiring program through which the agency created an annual workforce profile to identify job titles where one or more demographic group is underrepresented. These titles are subject to a structured hiring that includes various measures to increase the size of the applicant pool, as well as reduce bias in the interview and selection process by having large and more diverse hiring panels, standard interview questions, and candidate scoring. Since the program launch, DOT has seen a 10.5% decrease in the number of titles with demographic underrepresentation. While we have much more work to do, I will now turn to some examples of how our work makes it easier and safer for travel around the city for all New Yorkers, regardless of factors including where they live, their race, or their ability, while improving health and sustainability by encouraging the shift to more sustainable transportation modes and cleaner vehicles. This is particularly important in low-income neighborhoods and community of colors, such as the South Bronx, where children have disproportionately suffered from asthma and being exposed to higher level of air pollution. Through the New York City Clean Trucks Program, the agency gives incentive to accelerate the deployment of cleaner trucks in industrial business zones, which are located near environmental justice communities that have historically been subject to a disproportionate amount of diesel exhaust emissions. The program supports replacing older, dirty diesel-powered trucks with advanced transportation technologies and alternative fuels trucks, including electric trucks, leading to cleaner air and health benefits in these communities. Our Better Buses program speed up buses and shortens commutes through dedicated bus lane and busway and transit signal priority, which reduce bus delay at signalized intersections. These changes are particularly important in areas of the city that do not have access to subway. Some significant 2022 projects include University Avenue, Fordham Road, and Gun Hill Road in the Bronx, supporting the MTA's Bronx Bus Network redesign coming this June. Additionally, capital projects on the BX6 South Bronx Crosstown and the BA2 Southern Brooklyn corridor will deliver pedestrian safety and bus performance benefits. Our bike lanes make roads safer for all road users and make more people comfortable getting on a bike. We are focused on improving the cycling network coverage and connectivity across the entire city by building out the bike lane network. Some notable 2022 projects are bike lanes in Fordham, Tremont, and Soundview in the Bronx, which will provide critical bike infrastructure to both bike and scooter riders. And in Queens, we will close gaps in the protected bike lane network on Broadway between Northern Boulevard and 60th Street, and 34th Avenue between Broadway and 69th Street, a key corridor for working cyclists. And we continue to expand bike share and introduce new models of micromobility and other shared mobility services to give New Yorkers more options and close the last mile gap to access public transit in neighborhoods with less transit coverage. In 2022, City Bike's ongoing Phase 3 expansion will bring the system to Sunnyside, Woodside, Ridgewood, and Maspeth in Queens, and East Flatbush, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Ocean Hill, Crown Heights, and Prosper Lefferts Garden in Brooklyn, with even more expansion to follow in 2023. Once Phase 3 expansion is complete, more half of New York City residents will live within the City Bike service area. And to ensure that City Bike is affordable to low-income New Yorkers, the program offers NYCHA recipient residents and SNAP recipient discount membership for just $5 a month. In the Bronx, where we recently expanded into many low-income neighborhoods and community of color, about 66% of all membership are discounted memberships. In the East Bronx, DOT is in the midst of a scooter share pilot, through which we are closely evaluating the safety and utility of this share model. The three operators are all providing discounts program for low-income riders and are also testing a range of accessible vehicles for people who use wheelchair. We understand that many areas of the city still lack access to bike share or scooter share. We are actively exploring strategies to expand these mobility options to more neighborhoods. We will also do more to get the word out about the existing discount program so more eligible New Yorkers can have access to bike and scooter share services. Our car share pilot program also prioritizes equity and requires participant companies to deploy 20% of the car share vehicles within equity zones such as Parkchester in the Bronx and Far Rockaway in Queens. As we transition to a permanent program, we look to retain these requirements as well as encourage participating companies to provide discount pricing for low-income users. The agency is committed to making the city more accessible to all New Yorkers. DOT maintains and constructs pedestrian ramps citywide to provide for safe access on and off our street and sidewalks. Our accessibility pedestrian signal program is the largest and fastest expanding in the nation and provide access to traffic signals to blind and visually impaired pedestrians. The agency continues to work with the MTA to make bus stops physically accessible to all users, growing from long-standing program to upgrade bus stops under elevated subways to now address all kinds of physically inaccessible bus stops. And as part of Mayor's Adam commitment to enhance safety at 1,000 intersections, we are developing a program to install 100 raised crosswalks annually. This will make it easier for people with disability and all New Yorkers to cross the street at those locations. All New Yorkers should also have access to safe, welcoming, and attractive public space close to where they live. DOT redesigned streets to create, expand, and improve public space, and the One New York City Plaza Equity Program support the need of over 30 plazas in under-resourced neighborhood, providing landscaping, maintenance, financial subsidies, and technical assistance to plaza partners organization. In the face of the pandemic, our agency, in partnership with the City Council, reimagined our street to create the Open Street program, which create new outdoor space for New Yorkers to enjoy, the largest one in the nation too. Open Street partners have access to funding, programming opportunities, technical support, and citywide coordination and enforcement. And DOT directly manage over 20 open streets, with this street receiving maintenance as well as landscaping and barricade management. This model has allowed the agency to support new, vibrant public space in areas that would not have had it otherwise. Also, in response to the pandemic, DOT, along with our sister agency, set up the Open Restaurant Program in matter of weeks to support the city beloved restaurant industry, save 100,000 jobs, and bring us all much needed joy during this challenging time. And the program brought the benefit of outdoor dining to new areas of the city that were not eligible previously due to zoning restrictions for sidewalk seating. As we recently testified before the council, we are now actively working to create an outdoor dining program that can live on well beyond the recovery from the pandemic. I would like to thank the council for approving the removal of the geographic restrictions from the zoning last month, which will lead to a more equitable outdoor dining program that communities throughout the city will be able to enjoy for years to come, which will be a role model to the whole nation. In addition to transforming the use of our streets and expanding transportation options, we know that street maintenance is important to elected officials and most important to our communities. And we are committed to keeping our street network in a state of good repair. To identify possible correlations between socioeconomic factors and past investment, we have been deploying ways to analyze the location and distribution of assets we manage, including the condition of our roadways. Our analysis show that our process of distributing resurfacing lane miles to every community board by relying on the street condition and number of lane miles in the board has led to an equitable program. There is relatively no correlation between high average income and DOT's investments in streets. And since 2016, the agency has used a scoring and ranking system that incorporates equity as an important metric to prioritize projects for our $4 billion 10-year capital street reconstruction program. Thanks to this method, we have seen a significant increase in capital funding for street projects in low-income neighborhoods and areas with low levels of capital investment from our agency historically. We are committed to improving this process and investing further in these communities. And we are proud to operate the Staten Island Ferry to provide free transportation from Staten Island to Manhattan to over 22 million people each year. Last month, I stood with Mayor Adams as we commissioned the new Sandy Ground Staten Island Ferry, named for New York's first free Black community, which was settled in 1828 and served as a stop on the historic Underground Railroad. The Sandy Ground is the first Staten Island ferry boat named to honor the rich history of Black New Yorkers living on Staten Island. And as Mayor Adams and Speaker Adams announced last month, the Fair program, which I had the opportunity to champion when I was a council member, will be expanded and made permanent. This critical program provides discounts, MetroCard to low-income New Yorkers. The announcement that the city will baseline $75 million in funding is the first sign that the city has guaranteed annual funding for the program. Finally, I would like to finish by further addressing safety, our number one priority. As discussed earlier, our safety intervention are data-driven and prioritized based on fatality and serious injury data to identify location that disproportionately accounts for pedestrian fatality and severe injuries. In addition, not every intervention is right for every location, as the chairman said, and our traffic engineer do not apply a one-size-fits-all approach. Rather, we direct the interventions that best address speeding to the places where data shows speeding is happening, turn calming in locations where data show that they are turning conflict, and signal treatments that protect pedestrians in the places with many pedestrians and turning vehicles. Enforcement also plays a key role in our effort to make cities safer for all New Yorkers. That's something that I hope that all of us will agree. Dangerous and illegal driver behavior, many of which cannot be controlled by road design, continue to be the primary cause of many serious crashes. In the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has accompanied by a second pandemic of dangerous drivers. They had to be taken out of the street. We have seen an increase in hit and runs, driving while intoxicated and unlicensed driving. Automated enforcement is more efficient than traditional in-person enforcement and reduce interaction with law enforcement. And with a $50 fine and no point on a license, DOT automated enforcement program have much lower penalty than a ticket issued by the NYPD. A speed camera save lives. Driving at a lower speed gives driver and pedestrian more time to see each other and react, reducing the likelihood of a crash in the first place. And if a crash does occur, its severity is reduced at lower speed. Pedestrian is struck by vehicles traveling 25 miles per hour are half as likely to die as those struck at 30 miles per hour. Since the start of the program in 2014, speeding violations are down an average of 72% at camera locations during the hours of operation. This includes significant drops on notable arteries that go through low-income communities of color, such as an 89% decrease on Grand Concourse, 87% decrease in Rockaway Boulevard, and 85% decrease on Gone Hill Road, and 84% decrease in Eastern Parkway. In addition, injuries are down 14% in a school speed camera, with pedestrian, cyclists, and motor vehicle occupants all receiving safety gains. And from the start of the program in 2014 through the end of 2020, 7 years, the majority of violators have received no more than two notices in liability. Furthermore, most violators are not residents of the neighborhood where the cameras are located. A DOT analysis found 2/3 of a speeder live more than 3 miles away from the camera that caught them. And over 40% of speed camera violators have vehicles registered outside the city of New York. Again, 40% of speed camera violators have vehicles registered outside the city of New York. Regarding placement of a speed camera, we place camera based on a speed incidents and serious crash data. We do not take requests for locations or remove cameras based on complaints. As the map in my testimony shows, all neighborhoods are covered by the program 750 active school speed zone. And that is something that you also can see behind my desk here. And there's no significant correlation between lower average income and other population percentage and DOT's placement of a speed camera. we understand there may be concern that speed cameras are not always accompanied by street design changes to help reduce the likelihood of speeding in the first place. We hear this concern and are committed to making design changes where needed. For example, we are working with the community to redesign Seagirt Boulevard in the local ways as it has had high numbers of speed camera violations. Our aim is to have the number of camera violations decrease over time, both as people learn the consequences of speeding and also as we continue to redesign streets. Safety is our #1 priority, and as it is your priority, Chair, not raising revenue. We also do not have revenue sharing agreements with contractors. This means that our vendors have no monetary incentive to issue more violations. Cameras change behavior and protect the most vulnerable road users, our pedestrians. New York City program has been a model for Vision Zero cities across the country. Based on the program's proven success, I'm joining the mayor in calling on the state to give the city the authority to manage our automatic enforcement program. In conclusion, I want to thank the council for the opportunity to testify before you today on our agency vision for transportation equity, as well as the many areas where we are hard at work to do better. There's so much to be done, and I thank the council for your partnership as we work together to make the city safer, fairer, and more accessible to all New Yorkers to generations to come. Hoy le quiero dar las gracias a la chairman de este comité, Bruce Powers, por permitirme testificar en el Consejo Municipal sobre un tema tan importante que tiene que ver sobre equity relacionado a cómo nosotros como Departamento de Transportación hacemos las inversiones necesarias en cada una de las comunidades para que las calles sean seguras para todos y también que la agencia refleje lo que es la población de esta ciudad. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will now turn it over to questions from Chair Brooks Powers. For these questions, we will additionally be joined by Deputy Commissioner Beaton, Assistant Commissioner Zach, Director Kite Laidlaw, and Director Rich. Panelists, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. Thank you. Chair Brooks Powers.
Thank you. And before we go further, I'd just like to acknowledge a few additional colleagues that have since joined. We are joined now by Councilmember Farias, Yeager, and Ressler. And before I start my questions, I first want to mention something about the process for our hearings. Going forward, I expect to see the Department of Transportation's testimony earlier. It's challenging for members to try and read the commissioner's testimony as it happens, and our conversations in these hearings will be much more meaningful if we have time in advance to review these detailed presentations. I've asked multiple times prior to the hearing, and I hope that in the future, the Department of Transportation will be able to accommodate this request. And considering the level of detail and data that I'm just now hearing, it's difficult to fully and comprehensively question and discuss such equity issues based on the timing in which we received the testimony. And in order to allow the council to perform its oversight function responsibly, I would appreciate it if the agency would send the testimony 2 to 3 days before the hearing. So first, I want to talk about the distribution of transportation infrastructure and street safety improvements. Traffic deaths are an epidemic across the city. Last year, we saw more deaths citywide than in any year since the Vision Zero campaign started in 2014. But some districts like my own, which had the most traffic deaths of any in the city last year, are suffering more than others. One of the reasons they're disproportionately affected is a pattern of disinvestment in their streets. Commissioner, Why do you believe transportation infrastructure investments have not been equally distributed across the city? Why are there disparate capital investments in transit deserts compared with transit-rich neighborhoods?
First of all, Chair, the first part of the question, definitely we will continue having a conversation with you and your team about the sharing the testimony. Historically, again, as my 12 years as a member of the Committee on Transportation, 8 years as a chairman of this committee, neither the chair sent the testimony to the commissioner or the commissioner sent it to the chair, but more than happy to continue engaging in that conversation. On regard to the question, our project planning will continue to be informed by data, including socioeconomic data and data on the past investment. And as we have shared, and I did it when I visited your district, when I had to speak to the colleague, it is a priority of this administration on the Mayor Adam and myself to continue paying attention to those communities that have never received the same capital investment in the past. But to further on what we have done so far, I want to pass it to Eric, who can also share with you where and how we've been working. Again, knowing that it doesn't matter how much we've been investing in the underserved community. And as a former chairman, I pushed the agency big in my role, in my previous role. But I also got to say that DOT, which is the largest transportation network in the whole nation, have made important progress, but there's a lot more that we got to do to give more priority to the underserved community. But let me pass it to Eric.
Sure, thank you. And as the commissioner said, it's an absolute priority of the Adams administration to make sure that we are investing equitably around the city. And part of that is why we in the New York City Streets Plan developed this idea of priority investment areas, where we always want to be guided by data, and we always want to make sure that we're addressing intersections that are at the highest crashes and the most fatalities. But I think we wanted to add this very explicit equity lens to make sure that we are not only focused on those areas where maybe we've heard the loudest voices over the years, but that we are truly doing it all over the city. And when you look at the map with the testimony of where those priority investment areas are, it is guided by places that are disproportionately people of color, disproportionately low income, but also places where the agency has disproportionately not invested either its operational or capital street improvement resources over the years. And we are very committed as an agency to correcting those imbalances and making sure that as we do our safety treatments, as we implement our mobility plans, that we are doing that all over the city. And not just in Midtown, not just in the central parts of the city, but big investments in Central Bronx, in Southern and Eastern Queens, in Southern and Central Brooklyn. These are all parts of the city that deserve safety just as much as anywhere else. And we are going to be committed as an agency and a city to delivering that.
Thank you. In communities like mine that are transit deserts, can we reallocate money to services like commuter bands that provide service in the absence of regular, reliable bus service?
We can follow, that conversation with you. More than happy to explore different ways of how we can be supported to the commuter band services. But also, as you know, and we talk about how we had to connect community like yours to cut the time that it takes for someone, especially to come from that area to here to Manhattan. And the day when I visited, when we did our very productive walk through your district, driving back from your district to here to 76 and 3rd Avenue, I experienced myself. It took me almost 8 hours. So, but beside the commuter bands, I also got to say that we also want to bring more SBAs, BRT. We want to be sure that we also improve the bus services. And I'm going to be also calling my former colleague at the council to help me when we go to the community trying to bring more bus services, because sometimes DOT has the vision, has the resources, has a plan, but sometimes we also being pushed back by in some area where they don't want the bus lane. And I think that this is something that the partnership will make a big difference.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I'm glad you came to the district and you were able to see what so many people experience in trying to get to the city and other parts of the city to work. And that was by vehicle. It's sometimes worse with public transportation. So thank you for raising that. How many bus timers are located in my district? For a district that relies on buses, we need to make sure that we have additional mechanisms in place to ensure riders have accurate information.
Yeah, let me pose it to Rebecca, who.
Chair, are you talking about real-time passenger information where you have, where you get a countdown of when the next bus is coming to a particular stop in your district?
Yes.
I don't have a particular breakdown of your district, but I can get that for you and follow up with Sydney if that works.
Okay.
Okay.
The Department of Transportation released its first draft of streets plan in December. The streets plan is the result of council legislation that requires ambitious targets for investments that prioritize transit, walking, and biking. This plan, if its implementation is taken seriously, has the potential to fundamentally reshape our streets. The mayor has also committed to redesigning 1,000 dangerous intersections. It's critical that these investments are focused on areas of the city that most need them, areas of the city, which like my district, that led in city traffic deaths in part as a result of decades of divestment in our streets, as well as other members in the council, such as Councilmember Lewis, Narcisse, and so many others. Has the city already started implementing these intersection redesigns? And if so, which areas have been targeted so far?
We have, and the person also here, DOT, that also have been overseeing the area is here with me. So I'd like for him to expand on that, on that question.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said previously, it's very important for us to make sure we are addressing the most dangerous intersections all over the city, no matter what community they're in. You know, the nature of our work is that we tend to do much more when the weather is warm. So as we get into the spring and summer months, certainly our larger street designs will be more visible on the streets. But we are not waiting for that. We are looking at signal timing and what we can do now to address places where there are large numbers of conflicts between turning vehicles and pedestrians, implementing more protected time for pedestrians, that they're not negotiating those conflicts with vehicles. And we are committed to bringing those changes all over the city. It's been fundamental to our work that we look at where crashes and serious injuries happen and let that guide our work. So that's part of the streets plan. And then overlaid on that is that equity lens to make sure that we are doing it, again, not just where we've heard the loudest voices over the years, but really where the data tells us those interventions are most needed. So as the commissioner said in his testimony, whether it's raised crosswalks, protected crossing times for pedestrians, full street redesigns, we're going to be putting the right intersection investment, the right street design change where we think it can bring the most safety.
And after Mayor Adams and I announced together with the NYPD commissioner, announced a commitment to get 1,000 raised crosswalk, we already started that process. So we know that, projects are on the way, they've been happening already. And this is one particular redesigning piece that we will continue, that New Yorkers will continue seeing across intersections, especially those that have the numbers of the most dangerous one related to crashes.
Thank you for that. How will congestion pricing impact transportation like mine? How will the distribution of funds from congestion pricing help to support infrastructure in transit desert communities?
It's a process in place, and the discussion will be mainly guided by the MTA. That very soon this year they're going to be holding some hearing, especially around the environmental impact study. But we here at DOT, what we are again committing, this is one area that we're going to be doing partnership with your leadership as a chairman, myself as a commissioner, and the rest of the colleagues to be sure that the congestion plan goal, which is to raise around $1.3 billion to use the money to improve public transportation, is something that, again, will happen, but that piece is related on how that will benefit, the different council. That money will be mainly going directly to improve our trains for the MTA, and that will benefit all transportation overall. But again, we are only, starting the process where there's some federal decision on when we're going to be starting that discussion citywide, but the MTA is going to be the leading agency, and definitely we at DOT, we're going to be sure that all borough are parts of this discussion.
Thank you. And when we talk about transformative efforts to redesign our streets and public spaces, it's important that we ensure the voices of the local communities are heard. Our neighbors understand the nuances of their streets and should always be given the opportunities to weigh in how investments will be made in their neighborhoods. By doing this, the Department of Transportation can avoid wasting time and resources on projects that don't work in practice. And this is something, Commissioner, you and I have spoken about several times in terms of wanting to center the voices of people in the community. What is the Department of Transportation's plan for community engagement around the streets plan projects?
Yeah, DOT has been doing, I can say, good work when it comes to the community engagement. And I gotta say that, as someone that was in your seat, and I was able to work with the former commissioner from Poli to Hans, I know that a lot of those work, the community engagement, require that level of partnership. We at DOT, in many communities, we know that the loudest, most connected, and well-financed voices do not represent the will of the community and do not act in the best interest of the community as a whole. And DOT is committed to seeking feedback from community members. As a new commissioner in this agency, I will be in contact through our intergovernmental division and our education division, not only with every council member to take the direct feedback, but also I will be asking you guys to help me to connect with the faith leaders, with the grassroots movement, with the different voices that we have in our community. I personally is going to be going to a borough each week starting very soon. And I'm going to be, again, not only relying on the team that they've been doing a great job, connecting the community in what is the most important project that they would like to see. So that, as you say, not project is coming by surprise by you guys who are important partners with this. So we will see, I can say, a different way, taking on from how DOT already been working in a positive way, but also taking to a higher level on how we also connect to take the feedback not only from you as a council, but also from other leaders that we have in the community, that you are the one who know, that you are the one that can refer to us, and that be beside the community boards.
And thank you for that. And I'm glad to hear that yourself as well as Mayor Adams are trying to take equity into account. And, we will do our part in oversight to make sure that it actually takes place and that these commitments are followed through with. But I do want to acknowledge and just make note of that. So thank you for that. Also, how will the Department of Transportation engage the public in determining a path forward on things like the busways and bus lanes?
Well, and of course, our intergovernmental team here, they can explain more, but I got to say that what we know is that there's a process that we already been working at DOT. And again, as my previous role has been another, as one of you as a council member, we know that when DOT was, coming with a project to our community, the council members are one of the first connection that DOT have and share those projects. but Rebecca also can explain a little bit more on how we've been working. But I want for you to know that whatever we have done so and up to now at DOT is something that we will continue doing it, but also we want to hear all the way on how to connect.
Yeah, I would say that we have robust engagement. I mean, not far from your district, we just recently wrapped up and continue to get community feedback on Jamaica Archer busways and out in Southeast Queens. So our transit development teams go to community boards and speak with elected officials on a sustained regular basis when it comes to projects in their district. And I don't know if Eric wants to say more about his team, but and we did that with the streets plan engagement too, leading up to the release of the streets plan. I don't know if Eric wants to.
Yeah, just as the commissioner said, we have a strong commitment to make transit in the city work better and make bus speeds faster. And, the slowest bus speeds in the nation. And it's a tremendous harm to communities, especially outside the subway system. But we also know that we have to do it in partnership with the community. How those are implemented and how we need to work with businesses and other local institutions to make sure that we do it in the way that reflects the needs of the community. So I think what you should take away from us is we want to do more of this. We want to make sure we're improving our transportation system, but also that we know we need to do it in partnership with local stakeholders and people who live and work and shop in those communities.
Thank you. Next, I would like to discuss the camera enforcement programs and how we approach achieving street safety as a city. All New Yorkers should have the right to walk, bike, or drive on our streets and sidewalks without fear of traffic crashes. And I understand that enforcing the rules of the road is one element of achieving that, but perpetual enforcement and the fines that come with it can't be our entire solution. The city needs to have a plan to make streets safer so that eventually our need for enforcement is reduced. And I know, Commissioner, you mentioned that that is the intention, but I just wanted to underscore that. And rather than making these systems a permanent means of revenue generation in our communities. So how is the Department of Transportation choosing which areas of the city to implement speed cameras? And more importantly, does the Department of Transportation have a plan to prioritize speed camera locations for traffic calming and other safety investments?
The answer is yes, and that's connected to the previous question again that we've been talking, that you've been asking, and we've been engaged in this conversation. You know, as the question came before on how do we determine which infrastructure investment are needed in the underserved community? How are we engaging the community in those discussions? Well, there's no doubt that investing on redesigning is a top priority for us. So bringing a speed camera is not the only a factor that we need to look at. What we know is that, first of all, when it comes to the speed cameras, I say in your testimony, and back here you can see, and anyone can see behind my desk, this is how the speed camera are being distributed. And you can see that they being distributed equally in most of the borough, most of the community. What we also know is also that when the speed camera are installed in the area, there's a reduction of crashes. And as I said before, and probably I will have a different approach when it comes to, you know, a speed camera use automatic enforcement if I would not be a member, if I was not a member of the Community Transportation for 2 years. Because when I see the story, the images of those working class, middle class, upper class New Yorkers, all New Yorkers losing their life in each of our council districts, we know that when we bring a speed camera, it reduces crashes and it saves life. So I agree with you. And that's what I would say before. We will continue paying attention and giving more importance to bring more investments on redesigning infrastructure investment to our out-of-borough area, but a speed camera save lives.
May I say a bit more about, I'd like to speak a bit more about the details of how we locate our cameras, where we choose to put them, and exactly what they do. It was important to us from the time our speed camera program was authorized in 2014 that we really built equity into the structure of the program, because we knew that camera enforcement can do things that traditional enforcement simply cannot. First of all, we made sure that our cameras cannot identify any driver or any features of a driver. It simply takes the picture of the license plate on the back of the car and sends the violation to the registered owner of the vehicle. So from that point, we know definitely that it's impossible to profile any particular driver. We know also from where we're putting it, I recall you said in your preamble to this hearing that it's important that we dedicate our resources to where they're needed most. And I completely agree. And for that, our placement of the cameras is entirely data driven. And we look at really just two factors. One is the incidence of death and serious injury on the corridor, and the other is the incidence of speeding. We take no other factors into account. When we unrolled our 750 speed zones as allowed by state law, we did them in the priority of where the death and serious injury and where the speeding was worse. And now that we have the 750 as allowed by law, as you can see, there's no community that does not have cameras. And the way that I prefer to think of it is there's no community in which pedestrians who are most likely to be traveling locally are not protected. We also believe that what's equitable about them is that the violation is $50 and no points on the license, because again, we can't identify the driver. That's a lot less than if a police officer pulled someone over for speeding. And we've also found that it's really effective for most people. I reviewed the data from the 8 full years that we have of this program, and of all the plates that are receiving violations, the majority got no more than 2. The vast majority really had no more than 2. So with that really light touch sanction, of course, nobody wants to pay any ticket, but if you're going to get it, it's a lot less than what the consequences of speeding could have been. I believe $50 or at most $100 is really small price to pay for learning a behavior to save a life. We've also built in things like there's essentially a 10-mile-per-hour buffer with the cameras. The camera does not snap your plate unless you're going at least, unless you're going more than 10 miles per hour over the limit. In most places around the city, that means you have to be going 36 in a 25. And I mean, for a safety professional who, like my commissioner said, a 5-mile-per-hour difference in speed can mean a great difference in survivability. We do believe that that's more than fair. It balances fairness as well as accountability. And then I just want to also mention, like the commissioner said earlier, the majority of the tickets being issued are not necessarily going to local drivers. We've done an analysis here at DOT of a month of data, and we found that 2 out of 5, about 41%, were actually going to vehicles registered outside the city of New York. And if we drill in a bit further to the addresses of these registered vehicles, 2/3 were located more than 3-mile radius from the camera. So we find it's not local people in the community who are mainly tripping up the speed cameras, but it is local people in the community who are benefiting from that 14% decrease in injuries and that 72% average decrease in speeding at the times that the cameras are open. And then finally, I think one important point for equitability, because as you've probably seen, there's been controversy over speed cameras in places like Buffalo and Chicago and other cities around the country. Our contractors do not get any portion of the revenue. All the revenue from speed cameras goes into the general fund. We do not do this. We have never done this, and we will never do this because we believe it's unethical. We do not want any company to have a financial interest in our tickets or to have any kind of incentive to issue more tickets. It might sound kind of silly, but we do want our cameras to put themselves out of business, because then that would mean there was no speeding. It's just one part of our extensive Vision Zero toolkit, but we truly believe that not only the cameras themselves, but the way New York City has uniquely implemented them has made this the most equitable form of enforcement.
And this is, Chair, this is an area where definitely the partnership with you and the rest of the colleagues is very important, because this is about, all of us are engaging in the conversation with a constituency that we have in New York City to understand that we need to change the behavior of how we drive. When we got Albany support for us to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, we heard the testimony of everyone, doctors and advocates, saying when a driver is driving at 25 miles per hour, he or she is safer and the pedestrian is safer too. So what we have seen is that drivers quickly learn to remain at a safe speed, and the result is safer street for all. And I know that that's a goal that all of us have. No one should be driving more than 25 miles per hour in New York City, regardless of the socioeconomic and race background and the community that represent. you know, with COVID was a big pandemic. And hopefully, today we are reopening a school, you know, for the student not to have more mandated to have masks. We also have to understand that there's the other pandemic that is hitting our society. It's a 1.2 million people who lose their life in the world as a result of crashes. And we in the city of New York contribute to those numbers. I know that when we hear testimony from those families that they have lost their loved one, we will get a different perspective. So if our communities overall don't want to get a speed camera, all they have to do is only to drive in 25 miles per hour.
Thank you for that. How much revenue did the city generate through the camera enforcement program in 2021?
We can get this to you. We do issue annual reports as required by state law, and it is available online. If you just search New York City speed camera report, and that will be available. Our last published data is for 2020.
But I can forward that to Sydney and also follow up the revenue number too, Chair.
Thank you. In the same spirit of that, I wanted to know if the administration has plans to ensure that the investments in safe streets are made in amounts that correspond with the fine revenue that we are taking in.
Well, like I said earlier, we know that the people who are getting the actual fines do not necessarily, and in most cases, do not live in the communities where these are happening. By state law, all revenue from speed cameras must go into the general fund. But like Deputy Commissioner Beaton has said earlier, we have created the priority investment areas as part of our street plan, as part of explicit recognition that historically not all neighborhoods have been treated equally. And we believe that because that formula incorporates lack of prior investment, it is a fair and equitable way for us to work there. But of course, yeah, the revenue is out, where exactly speed camera revenue goes is outside of city control.
So my issue with that a little bit is that in one vein, you know, putting up these cameras in communities where data is driving us to, but there clearly is something going on that's creating these crashes, but yet that money is going into a general pot and not coming back into the same said communities. So what you're saying doesn't align with itself. So if the city is given local authority over the camera enforcement programs, I'd like to know what changes to the program DOT supports. And specifically, I want to know, would you support a proposal to dedicate camera revenues to the neighborhoods in which the violations occur?
Look, I think that, as you know, we will have the budget hearing very soon, and more than happy to expand on that. But I can tell you that, as you know, the answer is, for me, we need more resources than what we have, because, you know, it's like when we are moved to the responsibility that we have from legislator or commissioner, we know that we have limited resources. And definitely, you know, our commitment, as I fought for so many years, and now from my role, is going to be to continue giving priority to underserved community that for many years have been left behind. So that piece related to the technicality on how, you know, that revenue is reinvested, those that come from the speed camera, you know, this is something that definitely more than happy to sit down with you and follow this conversation. But what I can tell you is about, it doesn't matter from where we raise the revenue from a speed camera and other area, that money is going back to the community. Because what we will see is that on the major administration, in my role as a commissioner, investing in the third community is going to be top priority. So we will use money from everywhere, including from a speed camera, to be sure that from redesigning and all the work that we need to do, the underserved community where most New Yorkers live get top priority.
Okay, I'm gonna just shift a little bit. So when we talk about equitability and equitably distributing transportation infrastructure investments, the conversation can't just be where those dollars are going. It also needs to be about who those project dollars are going to. And one of my top priorities is to work with city agencies to increase the utilization of MWBEs in city infrastructure projects. What is DOT's plan for improving its track record on using MWBEs? If there isn't currently a plan, I want to discuss how we ensure that there is one moving forward.
I will let you know that again, it is our goal to accomplish, the 25% for women and minority. But here also we have a secret Rich who also who is the Director of Performance Management, who will also expand on this question.
Sure, yeah, so at our DOT, so we're developing an equity and asset management analysis to help us assess our program assets through a racial and social equity lens. We're reevaluating our prioritization processes to incorporate social, economic, racial demographic information where necessary. So the guiding question behind this is what data and analysis can help us better understand equity gaps in our assets. And secondly, does DOT have an equitable distribution of assets throughout New York City? I think that'll sort of help maybe with the NWB program because we're looking at it from a different lens than we have in the past.
Thank you. And what are the barriers to increase MWBE participation along DOT projects?
I think that beside the mechanism, as Siku explained, it's about changing the culture, and it's about changing the mentality, and it's about recognizing that those New Yorkers are major on many months in conversation that he had with many New Yorkers. Our people who live in underserved community, they should have the right, they should have the opportunity to do business with DOT. And that's why, as we are speaking right now, and I gotta say that the team here at DOT, they understand that they open, they know that we're gonna be looking for those opportunities for women and minority, not only on a small project, but also we're looking for the big project. We're looking for where the big data are. It is time to replicate the sample as we have the first Black firm doing business at JFK to also see what can be, the big project that we have online and how can we also create those opportunities. And also in having this conversation with here at DOT to be sure that any of the large firms that they do business with the DOT, that they also bring partnership with other business that also are guided and led by Black, Latino, and Asian or women or members of the LGBTQ. So for me, this is something that, again, that you heard from Siku, the mechanism that we have in place. But what I can tell you is about from my decades of RASU organizing experience, I'm also bringing this energy here to the agency, continue the great job that they have done in certain area, how they've been able to see improvement on the women and minority, but also working on my time as a commissioner. I'm going to be following Mayor Adam commitment to be sure that there's going to be more opportunity for women and minority, not only on a small project, but also on big projects here too.
And on a similar note, Commissioner, so you see you being chair from before. What is the Department of Transportation's demographic breakdown, and what is the breakdown for the leadership team?
Give me 1 second. The breakdown, the DOT headcount is 5,615. There are 3,132 people of color, Black, Hispanic, and Asian, and Native American, meaning about 56% of the workforce are people of color. DOT has 114 leadership, a high level position, defined as executive director level or above. 42 of these positions are held by people of color, meaning about 37% of the leadership position are held by people of color. But most important than that number, we also been addressing the mechanism that we have in place to be sure that we will increase those numbers, especially at leadership positions.
And going forward, how does the agency plan on improving hiring practices to effect positive change and inclusiveness in its senior management team?
Yeah, let me pass it to a speaker also who he also can expand on this one. Beside what I say overall, we will see major changes. on how we will have an agency that will represent the diversity of New York City, and knowing also that DOT has been doing important progress, but there's a lot more that we got to do. And this is not only about DOT. This is about the city of New York. This is about changing the culture that we have when it comes to giving opportunity leadership to all a group that make this city the best one in the nation.
So the DOT has become more intentional and holistic over the past few years in our hiring practices. Let me name some of the key initiatives we're proud of. First is our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which was established in 2018 as a governing body to support various diversity and inclusion initiatives at the agency. For instance, increasing representation of people of color on high-level positions and ensuring fair and equitable promotion opportunities across the agencies. Next, I'll mention is the Workforce Profile Report, which the Commissioner mentioned in his opening statement, which baselines figures related to underutilization and workforce composition broken down by DOT division and job group. The report includes key performance indicators to measure the successes of some of the committee's initiatives. It also designates a set of titles of interest which are experiencing underrepresentation in one or more demographic groups. Titles of interest are subject to our structured hiring program, again, which is something that the Commissioner mentions open a statement, which mitigates bias, subjective error, and confusion by establishing written onboarding guidelines. And lastly, which I think is a really great initiative here, is the Employee Resources Group, which are employee-led groups of employees, obviously, who seek equity and belonging in the workplace. ERGs, or we call them, began in the 1960s in response to racism. They celebrate, promote, and advocate professional development, cultural connections, and diversity and inclusion. Finally, the ERGs are essential in helping DOT achieve the strategic diversity and inclusion goals of workforce diversity, workplace inclusion, and community understanding.
And I gotta say that everything that Secret explained is what we will be guiding our agency as we move forward.
Thank you. And I know my colleagues also have questions, so I will turn to them now and come back with more questions in the second round.
Thank you, Chair. I will now call on council members in the order they have used the Zoom raise hand function. If you would like to ask a question and have not yet used the Zoom raise hand function, please raise it now. Council members, please keep your questions to 5 minutes. The Sergeant at Arms will keep a timer, and I will let you know when your time is up. You should begin once I have called on you and the Sergeant has announced that you may begin before delivering your testimony. First, we will hear from Councilmember Lewis, followed by Councilmember Stevens, followed by Councilmember Narcisse. Councilmember Lewis.
Starting time.
Thank you, Chair Brooke Powers, for holding this very important transportation equity hearing. My district suffers a lot. We're a transit desert, but most importantly, transit fatalities happens in this district a lot. So I have like 4 quick questions to ask the panel, and I'll just go straight through and ask all of them because we're limited on time, and you could answer or respond accordingly. On February 13th, a driver fatally struck a teenager from my district on Kings Highway. Kings Highway is known as the road of death. And he was only 1 block away from home. This incident was a major tragedy for our district. So I wanted to know from DOT, are you regularly tracking the intersections and thoroughfares where crash and accidents occur? If no, why not? And if yes, is the data compiled and then used to prioritize those areas for redesign or increased safety measures? My second question is in regards to the bus route. So District 45 has one of the highest numbers of residents that work in healthcare. Long commute times disproportionately impact all my constituents. And more likely the commute time for rush hours take longer. So I wanted to know in the last 2 years when MTA implemented a plan that reduced one of the busiest routes, which is the B46 on Utica Avenue, which goes through 5 council districts, by adding longer buses for a larger capacity for more passengers. I wanted to know if MTA saved on that And are there plans to change more bus routes? The other question I had was in regards to tractor trailers. I wanted to know how is DOT addressing illegal parking of tractor trailers in residential neighborhoods in New York City? I know all of our council districts are going through this, and I wanted to know, is there a remedy that DOT was thinking about? And last but not least, regarding the Interborough Express, the MTA would be engaging in this process, but I wanted to know, have you thought about the affected property owners along this proposed route? If eminent domain would not be used, what is the other option that would be given to property owners on MTA's behalf? Thank you so much.
Let me start with the last one, with the Queens, Brooklyn, Interborough connection. MTA is going to be guiding that conversation. So definitely, you as one of the council members that represent area where that community will be impacted. More than happy again to make the connection between your office, yourself, and MTA, as we will be planning the community engagement meeting. With the legal parking trailer, I don't know if Rebecca would like to add to that one.
No, I mean, I was gonna say it mainly remains an enforcement issue, but Eric, I don't know if there's something you else wanted to say about that.
Right, so it's of course illegal to park tractor trailers on the street overnight or any commercial vehicle, but it's both sides of the coin. We work with PD to target enforcement, and when we hear about locations, we work with them to really get out there. We're also working with our partners at EDC because we want to try to provide legal places off street where they can go, because we know that there are federal hours of service rules that sometimes lead to this behavior. And by providing legal places for them to go, we think that's the best way to get them out. So it's not just enforcement driven.
So we will, this is about a lot has to do with enforcement, and let's be sure that also any particular case that you have or the colleague has, at the council, please, let's be sure that our team also put some pressure to see more enforcement happening there. When it comes to the buses, our commitment is to address transportation deserts. I don't know if we have any specific answer to that question in that bus lane. Do you have?
Yeah, I mean, the B46 Utica Avenue, it's the busiest bus route in Brooklyn. We know it's a critical lifeline for a huge swath of your district and others as well. And so we work very closely with New York City Transit to put in the bus lanes there, so that the buses can go faster to get people to the subway or to the hospitals or other places. One of our big asks with the MTA is whenever we put in a bus lane, we want them to put that time savings back into more service and better service. And what we see over the years is that when buses go faster, more people take them, and that causes the MTA to increase service. We want to continue working with them and make sure that they are increasing that service, not decreasing it, because that's part of the bargain. Is we want the bus service to be better with the bus lane, and we have a strong partnership with them, and we'll absolutely follow up to make sure there.
And then can you say a little bit more after she specifically started her questions with the Kings Highway crash on kind of going through our process from there?
Sure, and that's I think the crash at Avenue K, right? Just
Yep.
Avenue K.
Time
Yeah,
expired.
And we'll have to follow up with you, but that's the kind of thing that we worry about a lot. Kings Highway, it's a very wide intersection. We do have a capital plan underway to rebuild and redesign that intersection to make it safer. But we also know, this was a car with temporary plates. It was a pedestrian who was crossing outside of a crosswalk. We want to make sure that both the design and the enforcement come together. And we absolutely use data. It's typically collected by NYPD, but we get it in essentially real time so that we can be always focused on where crashes are happening around the city.
And in that case, or any other cases that any council member may ask about how do we use information in a crash, one thing that we should know is that the council passed a bill that I had the honor to sign that mandate now that when any crash happens, and as the investigation squad unit, they are the one, they go to the scene. DOT also send the team, get information, and use those data information to make decision about how we will be redesigning different intersections in the city.
All right, love to follow up with you all. Thank you so much, Chair Brooks Powers.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. We will now hear from Councilmember Stevens, followed by Councilmember Narcisse, followed by Councilmember Wrestler. Councilmember Stevens.
Starting time.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Brooks, for having this important committee topic, hearing topics today. My first question is, we often hear that, people are looking for support around expanding bus lanes and bike lanes. However, it's like we're asking people to really just listen and hope that communities that have been often disinvested from and who
Councilmember Stevens, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Did you guys hear that? I'm sorry. Do I need to start over? Well, my question is more around like for in a lot of transit deserts, like in my district, it's often this question of like, you should just really hope and trust and listen around the bus lanes and we know best. But what is DOT and MTA really doing to help regain the trust of communities that feel like over the years they've been disinvested from?
Well, as you hear, our commitment to expand the level of community engagement, that level of engagement will involve not only the community board, but also it will involve the local council members, as also the faith community, all the leaders that we have in our community that sometimes they have not been part of this conversation. We also, I also want to, be honest to all of us and share that as we talk about transportation deserts, where we know that our buses are the immediate resources that we have beside micromobility. Sometimes, as you said, we know that we hear from members of the community that they want to have faster and efficient bus services, but sometimes then there's other voices that they don't want those bus lanes to be in the community. So I think that engaging in the community, and of course, working directly with leaders like you and others, we will make some progress.
So I definitely hear you saying working with the leaders and hearing us and having conversations, but I'm just not sure, like, for example, in my district, the bus line, the 13 bus, that bus line, the times are horrible. The wait time is insane. And it actually serves an area that has no other form of transportation. And to be honest, I don't think people are really interested in having conversations and actually would just like to see real change. So I think that actually gaining the trust is actually doing the work and really improving these times so that people aren't standing outside for hours on end waiting for a bus. My next question is just around city bikes. Why is City Bikes the only bike share program that we have? Why isn't the city engaging and working with other local business and local bike people to really start a bike share program and not just working with City Bikes?
Well, everything could be on the table. And as you heard the mayor in the past, if I talk about, first of all, his commitment to connect all communities, not only with City Bike, but also other bike share and expand micromobility. So more than happy again to continue conversation with you, to take your feedback. On the last question and the first question too, like I really mean it, more than happy to visit your district, to take, your input. And at the end of the day, it's going to be working together that we will be seeing an expansion of services from buses, but also to bike. I think that we will see now in the three phase of City Bike expansion more than what we have done, even though I think that last year we saw major expansion, especially to the South Bronx, other places in Brooklyn, and here in Northern Manhattan too. This is a commitment. We want to expand bike services. They can include City Bike, but also we should be open to have discussion on that suggestion that you're making too.
Yeah, I think it's a real disservice and a missed opportunity for us to be working with local bike share programs and local businesses and not working with huge conglomerates who now I feel like have a monopoly on the bike share to New York. So we really should be looking at how do we make sure that's done locally. And then I guess my last question is, why isn't the Bronx a part of the interborough connection? I believe before it was a tri-borough interborough connection, but now it's only saying the Brooklyn and Queens.
That's completely MTA. And so DOT had nothing to do in deciding which area, but I think that again, this is a question that should be addressed and brought to the MTA.
But don't you guys work with MTA? Isn't that something that you guys could be starting the conversation as well, since you guys would know the importance in needing those connections to happen?
Yeah, we have a very productive conversation with MTA, great relationship with all the project, but when it comes to the announcement, when it comes to the area that will be covered, the Queens and Brooklyn, this is on the MTA. And there's gonna be having, numbers of community engagement, a town hall very soon. But I feel that, again, we hear what you said, and beside that, you can bring that suggestion again to us. I think it's important also to share the same concern also with the assembly member, with the senator, who have more input at the state level, because the announcement is basically on the MTA. We will be partners when it comes to, the engagement in all the area, but that particular part, when it comes to which area will be covered, that's on the MTA decision.
Time expired.
Well, I definitely look forward to you coming to my district to I'm sorry, I was just saying thank you, and I look forward to you coming to my district to see what I'm talking about, because we definitely are a transit district, and I hope that we can work together moving forward. Thank you.
Definitely I will. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. We will now hear from Council Member Narcisse, followed by Council Member Ressler, followed by Council Member Lee. Council Member Narcisse.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Brooks Powers and Commissioner and all the staff that are here to make the city a better place, a place where we can live, work, and enjoy. I live in a real transportation desert. I live in the southeast of Brooklyn, which is Canarsie, Mill Basin, Bergen Beach, Chipshead Bay area. When you live in the area, when people ask you, where you represent, you say 46th district. Where is that again? So that's been your real desert. So my question, actually, it's about the study that I know in 2019, the MTA Subway Bus Division joined with the city agencies to find out the improvement that can be made, the extension from the subway extension from Utica to Eastern Parkway to Kings Plaza. I don't know if you have any answer on that. I would like to know what we can do together to improve that, to make that happen. And I heard about is the MTA problem, like from Queens enter Brooklyn and Queens enter Borough connection. Even with that connection passing by us, we still cannot make the connection because it's so far apart from Seaview Village, from the area that closer to Bell Parkway. So if any plan to improve our bus line, that would be great. Another thing that I need to cover, which I realize many of us have the same problem, it's our street is very dangerous. I have two big intersections that's most dangerous probably in Brooklyn. It's Flatbush and Avenue U, and Flatlands and East 80s. So if any plan to improve those streets, that would be very much appreciated, because we're losing lives that we don't have to. And on top of it, Rockaway Parkway and Seaview Avenue. Commissioner, I'm sure you know the area, but I will welcome you to come and take your own survey and see what's going on in terms of the transportation and the dangerous part of our district. So thank you for listening, and looking forward to make sure we make the improvement that we need to make to improve the lives of the 46th district. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Definitely, I will be visiting your district and spending time not only with you, but if there's any leaders in your visit that you also want me to interact when we schedule the visit, more than happy to do it. So our team here, they will follow up with you. I think that when it comes to the intersection, where the most dangerous one, those are information that, of course, Eric also can expand to that one. But I feel that we have good data when it comes to identifying the most dangerous intersections. But if there's any particular one that you want to highlight to us so that we can compare, more than happy to do it. Our business here is your business, is to save life. We don't want to see anyone to lose a life because, we have danger intersection. This is our commitment. Of course, as we said before, New York City is only a place of 350 square miles. So it's a more density that we have in the whole nation. But we are proud of all the work that the leadership team here at DOT has done it. But there's always opportunity to grow and to focus on those intersections that is important for your constituency is our priority here. So let's be sure that we any particular intersection are highlighted. When it comes to the buses, I want to pass it to Aaron.
Sure, and as you say, yours is a very bus reliant district, and we've done some work over the years. Certainly, Kings Highway made some improvements on flatlands, but as I mentioned before, we have a big capital project coming to further improve Kings Highway and Flatlands Avenue, and hopefully address some of the safety concerns you mentioned along Flatlands as well that are also present there. So we've done work on Utica, we've done work on Nostrand, with the upcoming work on Kings Highway. That isn't to say that it's enough. We know that more is needed, and we'll continue to work with you and find more places, whether it's bus lanes or signal priority or bus stop improvements, that we really want to make sure that we are focused on bus service in that part of the city.
I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working with you. If you have anything else to add, I want to hear, because we need to improve the 46th district, and Nostrand Avenue too, by Nostrand and W and X around there is as dangerous as the others as well.
Time expired.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, council member. And before I call on the next council member, Commissioner, this volume is going in and out on your end. Just wanted to make you aware. We will now hear from Councilmember Ressler, followed by Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Ariola. Councilmember Ressler.
Starting time.
I don't know if you were here for the opening statement when I spoke, but I actually grew up in a conservative home. My dad is still a conservative.
Sorry, would it be possible to come back?
Yes, we will come back to you.
Sorry, I tried to lower my hand to go further in the line. I'm just double hearing right now. I apologize.
Okay. We will now hear from Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Ariola, followed by Councilmember Ressler. Councilmember Lee.
Starting time.
Sorry, can you guys hear me okay? Hopefully. Okay, good. Thank you so much, Chair Brooks Powers, for holding this hearing, as well as Commissioner. It's great to see you on the other side now. And this is definitely an important issue. I represent District 23 out in Eastern Queens, which I believe it's one of the only council districts that actually has no railway system. So we don't have any subways, we don't have any Long Island railroads. And so we truly rely on buses, cars, mostly to get around. And, there's been some issues. I think for me, I just want to echo some of the sentiments of my former colleagues at the council. It's no, I think, coincidence that all of us that are on here are from a lot of the transit deserts across the city. So I have a few questions, 3 to be exact. And so I think just to make it easier, I'll just list all of them since time is limited. My first question was around how DOT coordinates with other agencies like DEP to ensure that the subterranean work, like with the sewers or utility lines, are completed on time and don't impact the local streets. And the reason why I bring this up is because while I was campaigning during the primaries last year, we were actually on Francis Lewis Boulevard, which is a pretty large street in my district. And a lot of the residents, their driveways are being blocked because there was a lot of sewer, I guess the sewers were being replaced, the streets were ripped up. And I had asked a couple of them, they were actually complaining because they had not had access to their driveways in a while. And, it's still an ongoing issue on Francis Lewis. I think they've made some progress, but when our offices reached out to both DEP and DOT, there seemed to be confusion around which agency was actually in charge of the work there. And so I just wanted to know if you could speak a little bit to how the coordination efforts are being done. So that's the first one. The second question is, even with the Interborough Express project happening, it's still not going to reach our district. And so I just wanted to know how you're making sure that communities like Far Eastern Queens, like ours, are still being connected to a lot of the mass transit hubs that are going to be in these future projects. So that's the second question. And then the third question is just really around, I know that beyond the speeding cameras, a lot of the complaints we've been hearing are with, a lot of these loud mufflers and speeding cars. And so I know that I've heard that there's been some talk at the state level about perhaps doing sound cameras in addition to speed cameras. And so I just wanted to know what you were doing in terms of the noise pollution, because it just seems like, especially, I don't know if it was the pandemic, but it seems like the noise pollution has increased quite a bit. And so, also from illegal car racing, the drag racing that's been going on. And so I just wanted to know what your plans were around that as well.
Yeah, so I first of all, with the last part of the question about the noise pollution is basically is on DP responsibility. However, I gotta say that in the past also, when I was a council member, we also passed a bill which was my bill, that made wheeling and speeding illegal in New York City and subject to like a year's in jail and $3,000. So as you hear at the beginning of this year from Mayor Adams and the NYPD, community, we will see more enforcement going on. All of us, all New Yorkers, and especially those who are in community that many times have been left behind, deserve to address all quality life issues. And I think that the one related to noise, and this is something that even though when it comes to noise being on the DEP, but also we will be working with NYPD to be sure that those individuals who are recklessly driving and speeding on the street also are accountable. When it comes to the coordination between agencies, yes, any project that involves DOT is coordinated. It can be with DEP or DDC. They're also doing any project. But at the beginning of this year, also Mayor Adams have brought different agencies together. And one of his commitments was, and it is to improve the level of coordination among agencies. So this is something that we will see a lot of improvement when it comes to moving forward in our city. And the third question was about plan to connect a constituency in districts such as yours to the mode of transportation. I don't know, Eric, if you'd like to expand on that one?
Sure. And obviously, the subway system is not going to expand dramatically anytime soon. So part of what we need to do is make it easier for people who want to get to the rail system to get there. And we do that.
Time expired.
We work with the MTA on buses and try to make the buses faster and more reliable, whether it's coming into downtown Flushing or services that get to railroad stations. But we work to try to make bike connections safe and available. That means bike lanes. It means bike parking at stations so that people have a safe place to leave their bikes. We want people to have options where they don't feel like they need to drive, that they feel like they have reasonable options for how to get into the transit system and get to the rest of the city that way.
And Councilmember Lee, as you know, I have been in the other side, where you are right now, and what I bring as a commissioner that having living in the underserved community my whole life since I arrived here in 1983, a working class community, is that the interest of underserved community is on my heart, and I'm happy that the first hearing that I have in front of you guys is on equity. And this is something that, again, your question, your concern are the concern not only of your district, but many districts that for many decades have been left behind. This is what we have inherited, but I'm committed to work with you to be sure that, again, any a particular suggestion that you may have on things that we can do as DOT or other things that we can bring to MTA are something that will be taken into consideration very seriously.
Thank you. Sorry, is it okay with the chairwoman if I actually just ask one quick follow-up question, sorry, on the street repair question I had?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I understand and I agree. I think the mayor is trying to make a concerted effort to make sure that city agencies are communicating better with each other. But in the short term, because projects like ripping up the streets for the sewage lines, those have been going on for months in the district. And it's not just our district, it's like different parts of Queens. And so is like, who do we contact then if things are not moving, if the project is not moving? Like who like, because if one hand is saying it's the other hand's responsibility, how do we just, because I think it's just causing a lot of stress for a lot of the residents where these projects are happening in. And so what's the best way to move that along?
Let me pass it to Rebecca.
So Councilwoman, are you talking about a DDC capital project that was being implemented?
I'm not sure where the funding pass-through is going through, whether it's DDC, EDC, or different agency, or if it's, but I know that it's a sewage utility line fix, which has been happening in a few places along Jamaica Avenue, as well as some of the major thoroughfares. And we reached out to both DEP as well as DOT, and it doesn't seem like there's a clear understanding of who's responsible. So in cases like that, how do we resolve moving that forward?
It sounds like that is DEP's capital construction project. My guess is, and we can follow, I can happy to talk to you after this hearing.
Okay.
I guess you should reach out directly to DEP's intergovernmental and find out if this is in fact a DDC managed capital project. And if it is, then I would contact, and then you could have a conversation with DDC about the specifics of that capital project.
Okay, great.
Thank
you.
You're welcome. Not only to that project, but to any council member, one of the directions that we got from Mayor's administration is about when there's any particular issue, it doesn't matter which agency, we are responsible to be sure that people, they don't go around, but we are committed to be the direct connection. So it doesn't matter, as you heard from Rebecca, you will hear from her, and we are committed to be sure that even though it could be a DEP project, we at DOT will be following with you to be sure that we address that concern of your constituents.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, because I was like, I can't be the only council member having issues like this. And so I just wanted to bring up this question in case some of my other colleagues were having the same concerns as well. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, council member. We will now hear from council member Ariola, followed by council member Ressler, followed by council member Farias. Council member Ariola.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chairwoman Brooks Powers. Thank you to the committee council and staff and Commissioner Rodriguez and his team. Many of the questions that I had were asked by my esteemed colleagues, and I thank you for those questions and the answers that were given. So I'd like to focus on a couple of things that are happening in the southernmost portions of my district. I represent District 32, which encompasses, from Park Lane South all the way through to the Rockaway Peninsula, taking in the communities or portions thereof. I want to talk about the community meetings that the DOT has had prior to your tenure as the commissioner. And I want to see if we couldn't improve on that. Oftentimes, the committee meetings for the DOT and the focus groups are at very inopportune times and locations for residents to attend. So oftentimes you're getting people from the community board, council members, staff, but we're not getting residents to come because it's at inopportune times and difficult places to get to, especially in transit deserts. And that is a real message from all of the council members on this call. I'm hearing transit desert a lot. So that's something that I think you should really look at times and locations for those focus group meetings when looking to change some transportation, means of transportation. In my particular district, the Q11 is the only bus that one portion of the district can use to get from Old Howard Beach to Queens Boulevard, where they can get the E train and the F train and all the different other means of transportation. We asked for an expansion of that bus into New Howard at these focus group meetings. Instead, the actual bus line was decreased. Now it will, and the times will be decreased, and they will only take people from Old Howard Beach to Rockaway Boulevard, where they can then transfer. And that kind of is something that would then hinder their time frame when they are trying to get to work. Additionally, the Q53, which runs all the way from Elmhurst to the Rockaway Peninsula and is a main line used for people getting to work, both from the peninsula to the northern portion of Queens and vice versa, is at a point of being looked at to be eliminated. So I'd like to know what your answers are to why the 11 was decreased, and there is talk about eliminating such a vital line as the Q53. Further, we were talking about federal dollars earlier, and I just wondered if we receive federal dollars and we get federal dollars, would they be used to add additional express bus service to the Rockaway Peninsula to Manhattan, as well as continuing the rebate for the Rockaway Ferry and perhaps expanding the stops throughout Brooklyn and Manhattan, because our district as well is not included in the MTA and the state's Interborough project. So we have to think more creatively as to how our constituents are getting to and from work, especially when we want to give alternative means of transportation and use less cars to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, first of all, with the first part of the question, Councilor Mariola, I agree with you. We always have to get the best venue and time and place where community meetings take place. More than happy to follow with you when it comes to any future DOT community meetings, so that we can together identify the best place that will attract and will make it more easy for the constituencies to participate. So you have my word on that. The other questions are more related MTA, because we do build the bus lane, the infrastructure, but the MTA, the one that made the decision when it comes to how many buses, where the buses will be going through when they're cutting any services. However, with the good relationship that we have between the mayor and the governor, and a better relationship with the MTA, we also can bring that concern to the MTA. And as we come to the federal funding, we are not there yet on doing the application, but we know that it is the commitment of this administration, led by Mayor Eric Adams, to be sure that we connect all New Yorkers today by buses and train, micromobility from bike services to a scooter. So let's follow the conversation with your team and to see how we can also be helpful to bring those concerns to the MTA too.
I'm expired.
Thank you, Council Member. We will now hear from Council Member Ressler, followed by Council Member Farias. Council Member Ressler.
Starting time.
Right. Thank you so much. Let me first say that it is great to be here for Chair Brooke Powers' first hearing. And I think we got very lucky to have you chairing this committee, and really appreciate your leadership and appreciate your focus on transit equity. And I want to thank Commissioner Rodriguez, who I know, from so many years of great advocacy, leading this very committee, cares deeply about these issues. And I want to thank you for really comprehensive testimony, and thank the whole DOT team. I'm very fortunate in the 33rd. I think we've got 24 train stations that are in our district. It's a far cry from some of my colleagues. Councilmember Narcisse earlier has 0. And for folks out in Southeast Queens that are in transit deserts and other areas, the investment of DOT is critically important. But we also have many equity issues in our community as well, from buses, where they inch along in our communities, and really eager to see, in partnership with the MTA, aggressive enforcement of cameras on each and every bus in New York City, transit signal prioritization, and more dedicated busways implemented across the city of New York. Similarly, City Bike, we have great City Bike access in much of our district, but in areas like Northern Greenpoint and Eastern Greenpoint that are furthest from the subways, we also have the fewest City Bike stations. And so we want to think about equity in that regard as well. But the most important thing I think that I really want to ask about is the friendliest of questions, which is we want to see the streets plan implemented, the streets, as quickly as humanly possible, and we want to make sure that you have the support that you need. What can we do from the council side to help make sure the DOT is able to implement, the master plan, the streets plan as quickly as possible, and how can we stay in constant communication with you all to make sure that we're hitting our targets and making it happen?
First of all, it is an honor to be working in this role where you are as a council member and what I am as a commissioner. We both know that we have history of being working together since you helped the Dominican Study Institute in the past before, joining the de Blasio administration. So we both know that we are not progressive by word, that we are progressive by commitment and by action. And we both know that our commitment to address equity is something that goes beyond the time that we will be serving. It's about the legacy that we want to leave for the future generation. And the street master plan will help us to take the city of New York where we should be. So I will pass it to Eric to get into the details. We feel that we have a good plan on how to implement it, but no doubt that, as a city that we have, again, limited resources, from your previous experience, I think that continue supporting all the funding that we need for this plan is going to be very important.
Sure, and I'll never turn down funding, but I think as much as that, I think a place that you and your colleagues can be incredibly valuable just by providing that leadership in your district. We've done a lot of work. We have what we think is a very good plan, but as the rubber meets the road and we look at individual corridors and intersections of places where we need to make this change, I think the more we can engage with the community and the more we can do it quickly, that helps us move projects along faster. I think we know that it's always a challenge to show up on inevitably what's one of the busier and most important streets in a district and say, we're from the government downtown and we know exactly what's best for this street. Not that we don't come with knowledge and ideas, but we know that you represent local knowledge as well. And the faster we can put that together and the more you can show leadership in helping people understand why some of these changes are very important for street safety or for faster bus speeds or for any of the other things that we want to bring to the street, I think that you can help us speak with the community in a way that's most meaningful to everyone.
I appreciate that, Eric, and I'm committed to doing just that. I've already given DOT a full list of streets where we need protected bike lanes, where we need better bus service, where we should have BRT. And I've identified the pinch points that are really the challenges in our network of protected bike lanes that make it so dangerous, including tragically one of those pinch points where we suffered a fatality this weekend. So we've given the list. We're happy to help sell the importance of these changes for the safety of our communities. But we're going to hold you all accountable to hit these benchmarks and timelines. And so we just want to make sure that we're getting updated crisply in 22, that you're getting this work done. And so we look for tangible updates as much as we possibly can.
Time expired.
Safer. Thank you.
And we are happy to be accountable. So we know that this is a role that the council have to play. And we know that, we are in this journey together. We want to turn the city, you're the safest one in the nation. And we also know that, we are working on a specific deadline and goal that we have. So we're doing the best we can, when it comes to respond to all the need that we have. And more than happy to come with you all and the rest of the chairman and the speaker and the rest of the 51 council members as partners in this big goal.
I really appreciate that. I hope that the detailed list that we've provided to the borough office really are being incorporated, because we know our districts best and we know how to make them safe. We know what safety improvements are most urgently needed. And it's our constituents who are out there whose lives are at risk. And so we're fully, I'm fully here as a partner. I know that Many of the members of this committee and council are, but we look forward to that openness to accountability, Commissioner, because there is no time to waste.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. We will now hear from council member Farias. Councilmember Farias.
Starting time.
Commissioner Rodriguez, great to see you again. Excited to be here at the hearing talking about this stuff. My district particularly is a transit desert, as many of my colleagues have expressed about their own communities, but we are getting some really great new interesting transit options. We will be a part of phase 2 of our e-scooter pilot really coming up quickly on us in the spring, summer. But my district doesn't have any current safety infrastructure in place to protect our residents that would like to utilize that mobility in the community. Getting the Metro North soon without, my community having any multimodal hubs. It's of grave concern for me to not be able to effectively move people throughout my community to utilize all of these transit options that we're putting together, especially since city bike expansion is not on the docket for this administration. So I'm really looking forward, to the Sunview bike network project and all the progress that we've seen on our bus network redesigns. My questions are around supportive infrastructure. So what are we doing to upgrade our local infrastructure, neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, to support safe streets for multimodal hub creation? I want my residents to be able to use bikes. I want my residents to safely utilize e-scooters. But right now, because of the years of divestment in this community of not setting up that infrastructure, we're coming upon a fast deadline of it being implemented without any safety network here in the district. And then to follow up with that, do we see an expansion of City Bike in our near future? And then just, I guess, just some kind of relation, my district is also, 2-3 generations in a household, so folks are using cars, and really prioritizing safe streets means prioritizing safe resurfacing and not having potholes and craters throughout our communities. Move people on bike and move people on e-scooter and within their cars. So I'd like to hear more about how you're going to citywide look at resurfacing and care to roadways within our communities. And I'll stop there to see if we have time for another question.
So, council member, it is again a great honor to be working with you. I know the leadership that you bring to your district, and I know how important it is for you that we connect, your residents to the best mode of transportation. As we will have, the meeting today at 3 p.m., more than happy to, to get later on into more detail about, the important thing that you have in your district. This is something that I'm doing with many council members, having the one-on-one conversation, listening directly on what is important for you. I feel that, as you know, when it comes to resurfacing the street, this is one of those that is the more equitable work that we are proud that is done at DOT. But if there's any particular area that, again, that you've been getting a lot of call or complaint for constituency, as you can bring to our attention, and we will talk about later on when we meet at 3 p.m. But any council member who are the direct voices in connection with the constituency they represent, beside the work that we do on resurfacing, if there's any particular need and area, please bring to our attention. When it comes to the expansion of City Bike, yes, that's our goal. We want to see that expansion in this phase 3, and only on City Bike. Also, we want to see the expansion of the pilot program that we're doing with a scooter. And you know me, you know that, fighting for the underserved community is a top priority for me. And as I said before, I want to make the case to all New Yorkers. When we approach the need to invest in the underserved community, it's not only to help those New Yorkers who live in those areas. If the underserved community do good, the whole city of New York will be doing much better. So we will work with you on the need that you have on expansion of City Bike, on the macro mobility, and also bus lane and other transportation need that you have.
Yeah, thank you for that response. I'd love to follow up with any additional stuff and maybe bring you out to the district. Even just chairing and having some oversight over the ferries, looking at that expansion and how we move forward and the potentiality of it being under DOT. I'd love to have just an open dialogue around that because we want the agency to be fully equipped and have capacity to manage all of these things effectively for our communities. And we also want them implemented well. So I'm looking forward to being a partner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. We will now turn it back to Chair Brooks Powers for additional questions. Chair.
Thank you so much, and thank you to my colleagues for those amazing questions, especially Councilmember Ariola, who I share the Rockaway Peninsula with, recognizing some of the need for having additional transportation resources in light of being on a peninsula. So thank you for highlighting that, as well as all the important issues raised by my colleagues. So I just have a few more questions before we open it up to the public. And so as chair of this committee, I want to make sure that DOT remains consistent in its maintenance of streets and sidewalks. How many lane miles did DOT resurface in 2021, and did it meet the agency's goal?
Give me 1 second. The condition of the lane miles are based on the street rating performed by the street assessment unit. The process of rating the street by another unit with the agency add an additional level of objectivity to the assessment, and therefore in addition, in allocation or resurfacing. The street assessment process include an audit and cross-checking process to ensure that we get the numbers so far. Give me 1 second. The numbers of miles resurfaced by borough as of 2/25/22 is 980 miles.
How does that compare with 2020?
I don't have that comparison. Give me 1 second. 20 is 1,092 miles.
And how does DOT determine where to prioritize resurfacing projects?
Well, and I can pass it to a speaker who can talk about, how equity is how when it comes to resurfacing is one of the samples that we can share from DOT perspective.
Sure. So DOT's lane mile target is determined by the approved budget each fiscal year. The target is distributed by borough, which is further broken down by community board, factoring in road condition and allocation percentage for each community board. So using our equity and asset management analysis, we incorporated average income and average non-line percentage for each neighborhood within those community boards. There are about 190 neighborhoods citywide. We calculated the total lane miles for all neighborhoods against lane miles resurfaced. We concluded the distribution of the program was almost flat, indicating an equitable program. And for the statisticians out there, that's a correlation coefficient of 0.04.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And what is DOT's proposed budget for street resurfacing, and how does it compare to previous years?
We have to follow up with our budget. Yeah, we might have to follow up with the budget hearing, Chair.
Okay, I look forward to the response there. Let's see. I just want to make sure I'm at least asking some of the critical ones before we go over to the public. I will say in my district, we often have complaints about the cleanliness of our public space. And I know it isn't just a DOT issue, and many city agencies are involved. Do you believe a lack of agency coordination as a barrier to cleaner public space? And what do you think should be done to address this issue? Should we codify the status quo arrangement between agencies or try something different?
Well, I can start. We know that for cleaning the street, that's what we refer to, is basically on the Department of Sanitation. There's a new initiative that also is moving on as the Department of Sanitation, that we're also, we from the DOT, we also will be being able to have the opportunity to bring those areas where it definitely had to be, where we had to give more attention. We coordinate very closely and work with the New York City Department of Sanitation, and always happy, to talk more on how we can improve that.
But we do have partners we can talk more also at our budget hearing about maintenance of our plazas too, and how we contract that out as well too, in lower need areas of the city.
Okay.
Higher need areas of the city. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. And so just wanting to, as I close out my questions, just stress again the need to really start to look through the lens of equity across the city and transit deserts, even in Southeast Queens, where we have a need to extend bus lines like the 77 and parts of Springfield Gardens, or to be able to ease some of the economic hardships that we see. So in Rockaway in particular, to come off the peninsula, a lot of residents work in the city from the peninsula, and to cut down some of the time, they drive over the Cross Bay Bridge, which has, a toll. The toll, thankfully, is one that has a residency program, and I know it's more of a state issue, but as you're advocating with the state, I know every few years this comes up, but wanting to make sure we're looking at ways that we are able to alleviate some of the financial burden on communities that unfortunately reside in transit deserts, as we work to redesign and reimagine how our transit system operates and services communities across the city. And so with that, I asked DOT to stick around. We're gonna pivot to the public, and I think it'll be great for you to hear firsthand what the public has to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you. You gave the best closing, and that's what we are. And we're going to be planning on reimagining how, again, to connect all communities to the best mode of transportation, train, buses, scooter, and how to expand both lane, bike lane, and the partnership with the council is critical. So more than happy to continue working with you.
Absolutely. Let's meet the moment. We're at a pivotal time right now, and there's so much work that we can really get done.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner and the Department of Transportation. We will now turn to public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling individuals one by one to testify. Each panelist will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please begin once the sergeant has started the timer. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the Zoom raise hand function. And I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. I would like to now welcome, Pastor Evan Gray, who will be followed by Lisa Daglian, who will be followed by David R. Jones. Pastor Evan Gray, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is regards in reference to the speed cameras and the oversaturation of the speed cameras within the Rockaway Peninsula. As you may know or may not know, within a 7-block radius, there's as many as 7 speed cameras. And from the Cross Bay Bridge to the Belt Parkway, there's only 2 speed cameras. My question is, they were intended to be around the schools to be for safety of passage of our children, which I totally agree with. It is not the number of speed cameras that's my issue. My issue is the poor placement of the speed cameras. They're everywhere but around the schools. PS 183, there's no speed camera near PS 183. PS 106, there's no speed camera around 106. They're everywhere other than placement around the schools. My next thing that I would like to say, if we should place the cameras around the schools, can a portion of those penalties or fines be distributed to the school that it is near to help in their school budget for special projects? I hope that you will be able to give an adequate answer to these questions and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Gray. We will now hear from Lisa Daglian, followed by David R. Jones, followed by Elke Weiss. Lisa Daglian, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Dagley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, or PCAC. Created by the state legislature, PCAC is the MTA's official in-house rider advocacy organization. Thank you very much for holding this oversight hearing today. February 4th was Transit Equity Day, but really shouldn't every day be Transit Equity Day? Mass transit drives a more equitable city, but we've not quite gotten where we need to be. And transit is essential for our region's recovery and our city's recovery, but it needs to be safe, reliable, affordable, and accessible. A safe system is one where everyone feels comfortable riding without fear. Not everyone can afford another option. We support the subway safety plan and its holistic approach to getting services to people in need. We'd like to see more funding in the budget for mental health crisis response and much needed housing. Affordability is also critical for a more equitable system. We applaud your commitment to fair fares and baselining $75 million a year. We agree more money is needed, and as is increasing outreach so everyone eligible knows about it. We urge the city to consider changing the eligibility criteria to New York City poverty level to more accurately reflect the cost of living here. The MTA's fare pilot programs, Atlantic Ticket, City Ticket, and Omni fare capping, are designed to make transit more affordable, and we hope to work with you to promote their use and expansion, including our Freedom Ticket proposal that includes free transfers to subways and buses. Making the system more reliable is key to getting people where they need to go when they need to get there, and that's really true in subway deserts that we've heard so much about today, and for those who rely on buses. We support the city's pledge for 150 miles of new bus lanes and busways by the end of 2025, along with the streets plan's commitments. But enforcement is key, and we support legislation in Albany to allow the city and MTA to place cameras where they're needed. The MTA's borough bus redesigns are now underway, with Queens up next. And we'll be participating, okay, and urge you all to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from David R. Jones, followed by Elke Weiss, followed by Wendy Feliciano. David R. Jones, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, I'm David Jones. I'm president of the Community Service Society and a member of the MTA board. CSS is a 175-year-old institution which fights for the working poor. I'm here today to talk about the Fair Fares program, which we spearheaded the fight for, along with the Riders Alliance and many other people, reaching about 270,000 people. We have some real concerns, however, that that's only a fraction of the numbers of people who should be reached. We estimate a minimum of 700,000 people should be signing up. In that vein, we have some recommendations for the council. We found that many people, particularly in the outer boroughs, didn't even know about the program. So developing an aggressive outreach and awareness campaign has to be first among many things. Streamlining the process for how you sign up is another thing. Improving what's going on in terms of this program and expanding eligibility to those with incomes below 200% rather than the current number, which hits the federal poverty line, which is the same for New York City as Mississippi. And finally, we think more money will be needed to spend on fair fares, because if it does start to hit the targets we're talking about, and it is expanded to a wider group of people who are at or near poverty, the amounts put in, and we applaud the council and the mayor for doing so, will not be sufficient to deal with the expansion of people who rightfully need this kind of incentive to help them to get to work, to school, to medical appointments, and to bring about a more equitable city. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I've also submitted to my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Elke Weiss, followed by Wendy Feliciano, followed by Dana Dennis. Elke Weiss, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
My name is Elke Weiss, and 30 days ago today, I sadly became a member of Families for Safe Streets. My grandfather, Jack McAllister, was killed last month by the driver of an SUV in a known dangerous intersection close to his home in South Brooklyn. I'm still coming to grips that my grandfather will never see me get married. He will never again celebrate his favorite holidays, and he will never listen to me and make me feel heard in a way that no one could, to love me unconditionally. I miss his voice. I miss his advice. That dreadful Saturday, my grandfather was using his wheelchair and was on his way to synagogue to lead prayers. He was a devoted servant of his community, and the next day he was excited to celebrate his great-granddaughter's bat mitzvah. My grandfather loved to travel. He loved his wheelchair. He loved to stroll around the neighborhood with his friends. The neighborhood is full of seniors like my grandfather. They go to enjoy the sea and the boulevards and each other. To think that my grandfather could survive the terrors of the Holocaust and not be able to safely cross his New York City street is something we will never forget. It terrifies me to think that that's what killed him. He was even wearing a reflective vest. While losing him was traumatic, it's the terrible preventable manner of his death that has us reeling. I think about Yehuda Lindenblatt, my grandfather's dearest friend, a fellow Holocaust survivor, who experienced the unthinkable and then had to watch his best friend die in front of him on a dangerous New York street at the hands of an SUV driver. My grandfather was loved, and he loved so many. Despite being 99, he was independent and happy and enjoying every day. He could have lived many more years. One more day would be precious. I ask you to remember my niece, whose bat mitzvah will always be tied to the death of her beloved great-grandfather. Remember my mother, who had to endure getting a phone call no one should receive. Remember his friends and his neighbors. Remember every event he will miss, and remember how much we will miss him. Most importantly, please remember the power is in your hands. We aren't asking you to split the sea, but to think of the seniors, of the children, of the families in every neighborhood, to take action to make sure our streets are safe for everyone. We know it doesn't have to be this way. I beg you to think of my grandfather and your own grandfather. And
please finish. Please continue.
And to do everything in your power to get Vision Zero back on track and without delay. We can't lose one more. I don't want one little girl to have to go to her bat mitzvah and know that her grandparents couldn't be there because they were burying her great-grandfather. And I don't want one more Holocaust survivor to, in his final days, have to bury a friend who died in front of him.
I wanted to just take a moment to express on behalf of myself and my colleagues on the New York City Council, my deepest condolences to you and your family. That was a terrible crash that should never have happened. In my district, we also lost a 10-year-old girl as well, Davina, to a car crash not long around the same time, actually. And know that as chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, that I am fully committed to making sure that in partnership with the appropriate agencies that we will make sure we have the proper investments and have safer streets. And thank you so much for thinking enough of this conversation to put your grief out in the public to advocate for such an important issue.
Thank you on behalf of my family for your kind words. I truly know that the issue touches you just as strongly. And you mentioned that you're looking for women and minorities. My grandfather was someone who was very interested in the plight of those who didn't have, having lost so much in the Holocaust. And this is an economic issue. You know, my grandfather thankfully had enough to have his electric wheelchair, but my big fear is for people with baby carriages, 10-year-old kids. You know, the people who have the least are the ones most affected by this. So thank you for fighting for people like that. My grandfather, I wish he could thank you for himself, but I will do it for him.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Chair, Councilmember Farias has her hand raised.
Please recognize her.
Councilmember Farias.
Thank you so much, Chair Brooks Powers, and thank you for sharing your story. What I would like to know, and I see Commissioner Rodriguez is still here, I'd like to see if the committee could see the data on how many complaints were in that intersection. I feel like most of us, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all of my colleagues, but we consistently say we need a proactive government, and our communities, we know our communities best. Our neighbors are telling us when they, have issues in certain intersections or need other safety measures. And unfortunately, time and time, we end up having to respond to an intersection that's in need or a roadway that's in need after a tragedy. So I'd love to see any of those data statistics on that area and see where we are with it now as well. But I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Chair Brooks Powers and say thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you, Councilmember. We will now turn to testimony by Wendy Feliciano, followed by Dana Dennis, followed by Betsy Plum. Wendy Feliciano, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
My name is Wendy Feliciano, and I recently became a member of Families for Safe Streets. March 4th marked the 1-month anniversary of my baby sister's sudden and gruesome passing after being hit by a school bus driver while she was riding her e-bike in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Her name is April Damani Rainey. She was 2 months and 12 days shy of her 33rd birthday. April's daughter had just celebrated her 16th birthday 1 week before the crash. She had 2 nephews, and a niece, my children, that she helped to raise like her own. She has an ailing mother for whom April is the second child gone too soon. She had more friends than I can count and was loved by them all. My sister was young, but she had what we called an old soul. She wanted to change the world, and she wanted to leave as small a footprint on this earth as possible. That's just one reason why she bought her e-bike. She felt more people should ride bikes to avoid hurting the environment. She wanted to buy and build a farm and build a community around it. She thought she could teach people a better, happier way to live. She wanted this for the world, not just her family. She was also an organ donor. And when she passed, anything that could save or change a life was given, including her eyes. Even in death, she wanted to help others. She also rode to save money and stay away from COVID. Her goal was to have another part-time job doing deliveries to make enough money to get us out of here. There is no way to look at this and find the silver lining. My sister died face down in a gutter on a cold, rainy day in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and she deserved better. Brownsville deserves better. Every neighborhood in our city deserves better. That's why I'm here today. If I can help get safe streets, infrastructure, including protected bike lanes in our poorer neighborhoods, where people are less likely or able to own a car and it can save a life, then it can bring meaning to her tragic death and take her one step closer to her dream to help people. My sister was love and light. She loved life and had big plans that we'll never see realized. She was the morning person in our house that would give us the pep to get up and go. The mornings are bleak and quiet now, and her room sits empty. Her daughter has chosen to live with her grandmother because our walls shout my sister's absence. The rooms echo the silence. We've lost 2 people in a way, and the ache is too much for words. We were not ready. We were not prepared. This was never in the game plan. My sister was supposed to bury me. Don't let her death be nothing but a number. Don't let any other family know our pain. Please, I know we have the solutions to prevent deaths like my sister's. We need these solutions without delay. And we need them in all of our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Dana Dennis, followed by Betsy Plum, followed by Daniel Harris. Dana Dennis, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Dennis. I'm a senior organizer at the Riders Alliance. We organize thousands of transit riders from all across New York City. We help them to fight for a more reliable, accessible, and then, of course, affordable transit system, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So before I became an organizer, which was about 4 years ago, going on 5, I spent 3 years as a volunteer rider with the Riders Alliance. At that time, there were many different campaigns we worked on, but one campaign in particular captured my heart because it directly impacted my community, which at that time was Crown Heights, Brooklyn. And that was Fair Fares. At that point, I was working full time. I was doing one of the hardest jobs on earth, which is being a home health aide. I was only making $10 an hour. Many weeks, I would do overtime cases, or I would take living cases, which would allow me to stay with my client for days at a time, just because I did not have enough money to put on my MetroCard to go back and forth round trip each day or do a 5-day commute throughout the week. And just to be clear, if you don't know this about home health aides, when you take a living case and you do a 24-hour day, you only get paid for 12 of those hours. So even though I was there 24 hours, I was not getting paid for a full day. And imagine that at only $10 an hour. So I just want to give a shout out to all of the caregivers out there, in particular those, the ones that CM Lewis was speaking about earlier. I remember days where I had to stand at Utica Station and beg for swipes, right? And I'm going to work. I had to negotiate with bus drivers, a lot of times on the same B46 we were just discussing, or the B45, that's my neighborhood. And it was a humbling experience. It's embarrassing for poor folks to have to beg. It's not easy to ask someone to swipe you in. So when you see someone trying to make contact, if you have it or you have an extra fare, please swipe that person in. But yeah, like I said, I needed to get to work, and it was literally times where I had to choose, am I going to get lunch today, or am I going to put money on my card? Am I going to, I had days, because I'm a type 2 diabetic, where I went without my medicine, which is metformin. I couldn't buy my pills that week because I had to put $20 on my card. And mind you, again, like I said, I was working. So I just want to get to the point.
Time expired.
Well, sorry that I didn't get to say the last part, but if I can just very quickly ask the council, Mayor Adams, and everyone else on this call to make a formal commitment to outreach. It's a shame that Fair Fares is out there. People need it. They're sacrificing food to get their MetroCard, and they don't know about it. We just want to say, get to your residents, get to whoever's in your district, knock on doors, see those NYCHA residents if you can. Just like CSS said, there is projected numbers beyond what we're talking about. So we're at 260,000. We're looking at almost 700,000 people that need the program. Let's do something aggressive to fill in that gap. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Betsy Plum, followed by Daniel Harris, followed by Sarah Lind. Betsy Plum, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. My name is Betsy Plum. I'm Executive Director of the Riders Alliance. Equity is at the heart of our organizational mission. I want to underscore everything my colleague Dana just shared. You will also be hearing from a number of our member leaders during today's hearing. I'm going to dive right in and would like to use my short time with you to speak about buses and the tremendous opportunity we have on our streets right now. Members of this committee represent neighborhoods that have long been transit deserts, overlooked by planners and policymakers. Laurelton, St. Albans, Canarsie, Soundview. That's not fair, it isn't just, and it certainly is not equitable. But something wonderful about our public transit system in this city is that we have more solutions than just building new subways, projects that cost billions of dollars and take decades at best. We have the bus, a subway on our streets carrying millions of riders every single day. These are the riders that Riders Alliance works to support and organize. A home attendant in Southeast Queens who regularly waits 20 minutes for the Q12, only for it to be too crowded to board. An airport worker who takes 4 buses every day to travel from the Bronx to JFK, a St. Albans student who goes to Brooklyn Tech and constantly struggles not to be late to class due to slow buses. The bus connects New York, but it can do so much more, especially if this council steps up. Streets have been too inequitable for too long, and that equity forces our buses to be the slowest in the nation, and our bus riders to be stuck in traffic more often than not. Streets need to change, and our ways of thinking about streets needs to change. Equity requires it, and our city will be better for it. The good news is the law is on our side. The streets plan requires 150 new miles of bus improvement projects in 5 years. The mayor has promised to do it in 4. We are looking to this council to help the administration deliver on that ambitious plan. With adequate funding, we can make it so that everyone in this city using our streets, a tremendous public asset, can have comparable, equitable access. Robustly investing in buses is common sense.
Time expired.
Examining equity. Riders Alliance is here to help. Our members are here to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Daniel Harris, followed by Sarah Lind, followed by Jose de Jesus. Daniel Harris, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon to the Honorable Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm the Executive Director of Transportation Alternatives and Families for Safe Streets. And I'm sorry that I've already had the opportunity to meet many of you as vigils have played out in your neighborhoods. I would ask and request that we continue to meet each other at groundbreakings in the years ahead. And you have our firm commitment from Transportation and Alternatives and Families for Safe Streets to help make that happen. I stand to ask for your support for 3 things. The first is, as this council had done, is to help advance the New York City Streets Plan. This is a monumental program that will help to deliver so many of the things that you have asked for to address transit deserts, to help to bring known improvements across the city. The second thing I ask for your support on is New York City 25 by 25. This is a bold plan that many of us on this call have pushed for to help repurpose our streets and give them back to people. And the third that I ask for your support, because unfortunately we will continue to have to meet with grieving families who will come to you, unfortunately after a crash has happened. As Executive Director, I have stood at vigil after vigil, and what each family tells me is exactly what you heard today. All of you have the power with our support to help turn that trend and to give our streets back to people. With 25 by 25, we can do remarkable things with just a fraction of our street space. We can ensure that kids can get to school safely, that buses can speed up, that we can give the open space that we need. And yes, to even those who do have to drive, to make their situation better. Because right now, nobody is thriving in New York. It doesn't matter where you live, and the conditions are even worse if you're a child, if you're an older adult, if you're Black or brown, if you're in a low-income community, if you have limited ability. I promise you that New York City has the solutions because I've seen them firsthand. We don't need to take you to any other city but the incredible city of New York. What we need is your support with DOT to help to scale what we already have and bring it to every corner of the city. No more New Yorkers should have to fear death or serious injury when simply crossing the street or standing on the sidewalk to catch a bus.
Time expired.
priorities, and we need your support, and we're here to provide it. Thank you so much for your leadership. On behalf of our organization, we look forward to the work to come. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. I just missed the third one. I was jotting down. If you could just let me know.
Oh, thank you. We welcome your support because you're going to hear a lot of loud voices, and we ask that you listen to all of them, and that you also consider that what we're simply asking for is how we can provide street safety tools that will inconvenience some, especially given that the minority of New Yorkers do drive, by ultimately bringing better conditions for all New Yorkers over time. We know that the things we're asking for, some of them can be immediate, some of them will take time. But when you're listening to the voices, is that we start with the most vulnerable, and those, again, who can't walk across the street without fearing death or serious injury, those who are stuck on buses, and many of those people are not standing up to yell as loudly in community board meetings. And they're incredibly important, as you all know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Sarah Lind, followed by Jose de Jesus, followed by M.J. Okma. Sarah Lind, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, thank you so much for holding this hearing. My name is Sarah Lind, and I'm the Director of Policy at Open Plans, a nonprofit dedicated to livable streets. You've heard a lot today about inequitable access to transportation options, which is a very real issue that we must address. But I want to focus my testimony on the inequitable effects of car dependency, which are just as pronounced and harmful. Car dependency causes congestion, which has disastrous negative effects, including loss of time, reduced productivity, higher emissions, noise pollution, traffic crashes, climate impacts, health impacts, and much more. And these negative impacts affect all New Yorkers, even and often especially those who do not own cars, who are disproportionately low-income people and people of color. Furthermore, it's important to note that the ownership and maintenance of a private vehicle is incredibly expensive, often pushing low-income families who have no choice but to own a car into debt. Reducing car dependency will help families get out from under that burden. But the fact is that most low-income New Yorkers do not own cars, and even those that do often do not use those cars to commute to work. Prioritizing free parking and vehicle lanes for the few New Yorkers who drive hurts the vast majority of New Yorkers who do not drive. And incentivizing parking and driving for people who could take public transportation but choose not to is actively harmful to those few people who really do need to drive. I will share more detailed proposals in my written testimony, but I wanted to highlight 3 things that the city can do right now. First, prioritize road space for protected bus lanes and bike lanes to get more people out of cars and into sustainable transportation. Second, the city itself is a large employer, and currently many municipal employees drive to work. The city should encourage municipal employees to use sustainable transportation by giving them Metro cards and city bike memberships, eliminating or severely reducing the number of parking placards, and managing trip demand reduction by placing employees like teachers, firefighters, and police officers in jobs near their homes. Finally, current traffic engineering standards prioritize the number and speed of vehicles traveling on streets. The city should make safety a higher priority than vehicular level of service in street redesign.
Time expired.
People level of service to focus on safety and the number of people moved. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Jose de Jesus, followed by M.J. Okma, followed by Christine Berthet. Jose de Jesus, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Brooks Powers, for the opportunity for Amalgamated Transit to testify before the Transportation Equity. I'm Jose de Jesus, President Business Agent of ATU Local 1179. I testify also on behalf of my labor brother, Mark Henry, Chair of the ATU New York State Legislative Conference Board and President Business Agent of 1056. ATU members operate and maintain New York City transit buses routes serving primarily Queens and Staten Island residents throughout the routes extending to the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. ATU 1056 represents drivers, mechanics who work for New York City Transit, Queens Division, with depots in Flushing, Jamaica, and Queens Village. ATU 1179 represents our bus operators, mechanics, and supervisors who work from Far Rockaway and JFK depots. out of the MTA bus division. Our members primarily provide the best transit option in transit desert areas of Queens. We also the transit option during periodic subway service shutdowns and allowed repairs. This demonstrates how buses matter both as a practical and flexible transportation mode. Buses often offer a cost-effective means to expand public transportation options, including sensible bus rapid transit, where none or insufficient modes exist. This allows policymakers to deliver transit improvements early and most cost-effective. The focus of our testimony is that transit in Queens. As a mass transit professional and user of public transit in this city, the members of ATU locals across the city and state offer unique and valuable insight. ATU locals have always empathized and smartly invested in public transit keys, growth in the economy, restore neighborhoods, mobility, and job assistant creation. In Queens, we also have a clear understanding on the need of assigned priority to enhance bus service.
Time
ATU
expired.
offers our recommendation and improve service. I have a lot more, but I guess time doesn't allow me. Well, Mark Henry and I were here for your any questions or any concerns we can answer. I know you have our written testimony.
How much longer is it? We do have a lot of testimony,
I
but
get it.
if you're covering both testimonies, we can probably provide an additional minute and a half.
Well, you have written testimony before given to you already, so we'll just leave
Okay.
it at that. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from MJ Okma, followed by Christine Bertay, followed by Cynthia Kozakowski. MJ Okma, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is MJ Okuma with SAGE, the country's first and largest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBTQ+ older people. We provide social services and community building programs through a network of 6 older adult centers across the city. I'm here today to discuss barriers LGBTQ+ older New Yorkers have to safe and accessible transportation options and call attention to the pattern of harassment and discrimination faced by transgender elders on public transportation. This is a dynamic that all transgender New Yorkers are confronted with, and it disproportionately impacts transgender women of color. It pushes many into financial instability and prevents access to employment, community, and services. The transgender and gender nonconforming elders SAGE works with have harrowing stories to tell about their recent experiences. I'm going to recall some of those now if anyone needs to step away. One spoke to me about being threatened with a box cutter, verbally harassed, and violently pushed off the subway. Another told me a story about how she was going to work when she was sexually harassed by a man who kept locking eyes with her and making suggestive gestures. She couldn't take it anymore and got off the train early, and he followed her. She weaved in and out of the crowds of Atlantic Avenue until she was able to shake him. She was 63 at the time, and the experience pushed her into her retirement because she no longer felt that she could safely commute to work. I want to stress that these are not unique or isolated cases. One step that the city and the city council can take to help address this is by funding trans-led and LGBTQ+ organizations providing transportation assistance to transgender New Yorkers. In the current budget, SAGE has applied for member item support under the Support Our Seniors initiative to help address this need. At SAGE, when we are able to provide transportation assistance with a trusted cab service, there's a clear spike in participation from transgender elders. One other thing I want to uplift is how accessoride delays are also deeply impacting LGBTQ+ older New Yorkers. Staff at the SAGE Center Bronx have reported that they need to stay open as many as 2-3 times a week because of accessoride delays, and it deeply impacts the frequency that elders can participate in our vital program and services. I want to thank you so much, Chair Brooke Powers, for holding this important hearing and providing me this opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Christine Bertay, followed by Christine Kozakowski, followed by Eric McClure. Christine Bertay, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for this hearing. My name is Christine Bertay. I'm the co-founder of CheckPeds, which advocates for pedestrian safety and rights in New York City. We applaud your focus on equitable transportation in New York City. So the first question, which has been addressed to date, is, how to make streets safer for underserved communities. And last year, I did a number of analysis, and in terms of traffic safety, the numbers give us a stark reminder of the inequalities Black, Latina, and Asian populations suffer every day. If you are raising a family in a community where more than 75% of the population is Black or brown, the risk that your children will be injured in a car crash is twice as high as in other communities. And in the last 4 years, traffic crash injuries in communities of color have increased at the rate of sevenfold faster than wider community. These were based on data on 4 years and ending in 2021. So there are two questions. How is the city prioritizing Vision Zero project? We need a clear prioritization on the work based on worst case numbers citywide. We have a software called Crash Mapper that all the community, the council member can look at, and they will see what are the most dangerous intersections in their district. We have a high expectation of Commissioner Rodriguez, who is very familiar with that issue. And the second issue is, why is the city penny pinching on saving people's lives? Why are the engineers still prioritizing vehicular flow over giving more time to pedestrians and full protection to pedestrians? We want to ensure that the DOT install the safest features at each treated intersection to protect users.
Time expired.
Oh my God. All right, I'll send my, let me just say one sentence. I think we cannot deliver equity on the street without focusing on the pedestrian, 66% of whom are non-white. And I will send my testimony about that.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Cynthia Kozakowski, followed by Eric McClure, followed by Jackson Chabot. Cynthia Kozakowski, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Cynthia, please wait to be unmuted. You may begin.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Cynthia Kozakowski, and I joined the Riders Alliance in order to help in this fight for reduced fares for all eligible New Yorkers. I'm a single mom to 4 kids, and I live in the Wakefield section of the Bronx. I live paycheck to paycheck, and it is a financial hardship to have to buy 5 Metro cards. The Fair Fares program helped me and my family greatly with the reduced fare. I'm asking this new administration to keep this program in the budget. It is needed for us low-income New Yorkers. I'm also asking this new administration to expand the eligibility criteria with respect to the income. There are people out there who may be $1 or $2 or $3 over the income criteria, and they're excluded. Those people struggle financially too, especially during the pandemic and with high inflation. They need the help too. I'm asking this new administration to invest in fair fares and help us ramp up our outreach. Lastly, I want to ask Mayor Adams and my City Council member, Kevin Riley, what is your Fair Fares outreach plan to reach every eligible rider in the Wakefield community of the Bronx? I thank you for your time and attention in this matter.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Eric McClure, followed by Jackson Chabot, followed by Carlos Castel-Croke. Eric McClure, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Chair Brooks Powers. Congratulations on holding your first hearing. Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez, for staying around to hear from advocates. My name is Eric McClure. I'm the Executive Director of Streets PAC, a political action committee and advocacy organization dedicated to making New York City streets safer and its public transit better. This hearing, let alone our 2 minutes of testimony, will only begin to scratch the surface of the problem of inequity in New York City's transportation system. It's a crucial topic that requires much more attention and effort, but calling attention to it today is a good and welcome start. New York City is plagued by inequality, and that grave imbalance extends from incomes and housing and education to the city's streets. Black and brown New Yorkers and African Americans in low-income communities especially are disproportionately victimized by traffic violence. This is due in large part to the city's failure to make equitable and adequate investments in life-saving infrastructure and traffic calming designs like road diets, curb extensions, refuge islands, and protected bike lanes, a failing underscored in an excellent analysis last month in Streets blog developed by reporter Julianne Cuba and How's My Driving creator Brian Howell. The New York City Streets Plan, however, is a promising step in beginning to address that inequity. Passed by the last council and signed into law by then Mayor de Blasio, the Streets Plan lays out important benchmarks for investment in the city's transportation network and infrastructure, and it rightly prioritizes that investment in communities that have been poorly served in the past. It's incumbent on this committee and the council and we in the advocacy world to make certain that City Hall and DOT meet the benchmarks laid out in the Streets Plan and to insist that it's fully funded. We must also continue to prioritize investment in automated enforcement strategies that remove human bias, like speed and red light cameras, and lobby Albany to allow those devices to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round. We don't turn off ShotSpotter overnight or on weekends. We don't turn off security cameras after hours. Far, far too many crashes that cause death or injury happen in places with speed cameras that are not operating due to curfew. The council must join with the mayor in lobbying Albany for home rule for speed limits as well as camera systems. Our colleagues in advocacy have spoken and will speak about buses in greater detail, but we as a city must make better bus service a top
Time
priority.
expired.
Furthermore, we must also make cycling attractive, affordable, and safe for many more New Yorkers. Biking has boomed during the pandemic, but there's so much more we can do. Subsidizing accelerated expansion of City Bike to many more neighborhoods rolled out in tandem with a robust network of safe, protected bike lanes is a great place to start. The city's bike share system is immensely popular, but it has yet to reach many New Yorkers for whom it would be an attractive mobility option. As the only facet of our transportation system that doesn't receive public funding, it's high time that we boost the bike share program with operating subsidies and with the kind of safe bike lane network that will attract and protect new cyclists. Let's see a bill come out of the council this year that puts that in motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Jackson Chabot, followed by Carlos Castel-Croce, followed by Tiffany Ann Taylor. Jackson Chabot, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackson Chabot, and I'm the Director of Public Space Advocacy at Open Plan. I'd like to begin my testimony by presenting a vision for a safe transportation corridor. Imagine children and caretakers safely walking and scooting to and from school, people of all ages and abilities biking along to the destination, children shrieking with joy, seniors talking together, and birds chirping. Now, I'd like to tell you that this already exists, and we can have more of it with proper funding and framework for management. This is 34th Avenue in Jackson Heights, run by a fantastic group of volunteers. Despite the huge need and demand, most streets in New York City have no local organization or framework that can manage public spaces and are therefore filled with vehicles, not people. Open streets highlight this and their disparity across the city. A Transportation Alternatives report found that 84% of open streets in the Bronx weren't even set up, for example. At the moment, business improvement districts are the primary public space managers, providing care, management, and maintenance to some of New York City's best public spaces, including open streets. BIDs have the ability to provide this level of service because they have funding, staff, and the mandate to manage public spaces properly. Furthermore, exacerbating this inequity, BIDs cover only 2% of New York City and are primarily concentrated in Midtown Manhattan and below. Outside of business improvement districts, public space is less cared for by the city, particularly in low income and residential areas. Coincidentally, business improvement districts are also presenting the most ambitious pedestrian safety plans across the city. And this is great. I also want this to be true in other parts of the city. We call, as Open Plans, on the city to create a framework and processes for better coordination, stewardship for public space management. We formally call for an Office of Public Space Management to help achieve safe and equitable streets by providing a framework to care for, maintain, and coordinate open streets, plazas, and more. The pandemic showed how important public space is, and now is the time to invest in it for the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Carlos Castel-Croce, followed by Tiffany Ann Taylor, followed by Pedro Valdez Rivera. Carlos Castel Croak. You may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Castel Croak, and I am the Associate for New York City Programs at the New York League of Conservation Voters. In a densely populated city like New York, access to affordable, clean transportation is more than an economic driver and a hard sought after resource. It's a fundamental right. We know that transportation is the leading source of emissions in the state and in the nation, mainly due to personal automobiles and heavy-duty vehicles burning fossil fuels. Furthermore, our frequent acceptance and perpetuation of car culture constantly undermines the safety of pedestrians and effectiveness of alternative forms of transportation. We are so glad that this hearing in particular is being held because while we see transportation intrinsically as a climate issue, it is also clearly an equity issue. Cars are a major source of air pollution, causing respiratory and public health issues. This is the case near New York City's major highways, which often run through low-income communities and communities of color. These communities are also often underserved by alternative transportation options and infrastructure designed to protect pedestrians and families from cars. In order to equitably improve our transportation system and fight climate change, the council and the city must prioritize the following initiatives. The city must continue its comprehensive approach to reimagining street space by implementing the New York City Streets Plan and the 25 by 25 plan. Traffic enforcement initiatives such as speed cameras and bus lane enforcement are an integral part of both of these plans. These programs and technologies reinforce the use of public and micromobility options, protect our residents from reckless drivers, and put money back into our underfunded transit system. The plans also highlight the importance of micromobility infrastructure. To achieve progress, we need to pass legislation such as Intro 2465 from the previous session to make it easier to build bike lanes. Lack of safe biking infrastructure is a major barrier to accessing clean transportation alternatives, and as we expand bike, e-bike, and e-scooter shares, we must also build out safe corridors to use them on. These issues are even more prevalent in transportation deserts where cars rule. These underserved communities need safe and reliable alternatives to cars and should not be forced to endure the constant pollution and traffic accidents that occur in their neighborhoods.
Time expired.
Very briefly, all of these pathways forward will improve our city by helping to reduce emissions, increase affordability, and improve safety, including congestion pricing, which I didn't get to mention. And we hope the council will work to fight for these crucial initiatives and plans so we can have a truly traversable and equitable city. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Tiffany Ann Taylor, followed by Pedro Valdez Rivera, followed by Lindsay Mayer. Tiffany Ann Taylor, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Ann Taylor, and I'm the Vice President for Transportation for the Regional Plan Association, also known as RPA. Equitable transportation planning and infrastructure building must remain a priority for both New York City DOT and the MTA. Transportation deserts, aging infrastructure, and underinvestment persist in many neighborhoods. The pandemic further illuminated these disparities, and as the city continues to recover, this is a watershed moment to creatively address these challenges. To enhance air quality, reimagining the BQE, implementing congestion pricing, and expanding programs like City Bike and the New York City Clean Trucks program can have an impact. Re-envisioning the BQE can help reverse the generational harm it has caused to surrounding neighborhoods. Congestion pricing will reduce traffic congestion and its negative externalities. Prioritizing historically underserved areas with expanded City Bike options and expanding available funding for the replacement of older diesel fuel trucks as part of the Clean Trucks program will further advance the city's goals as set forth in the roadmap to 80 by 50. With changing commutes and reconfigured streets in response to the pandemic, equitable enforcement design is more important than ever for street safety. RPA supports the call for permanent city authority over speed cameras as they have proven to reduce serious crashes at intersections. Other design enhancements for universal accessibility should be incorporated throughout all of DOT's domain and MTA's infrastructure. Lastly, in order to ensure equitable system accessibility, discounted fares go hand in hand with better bus service. While we're supportive of the mayor's continued commitment to fair fares, more funding is necessary to match or surpass pre-pandemic levels of funding. The city should also increase promotion about the program, as many who are eligible are not using it. All of the priorities I've outlined today can be found in DOT's Streets Plan. This means that the city has a current blueprint for how transportation enhancements should more equitably be implemented citywide. We implore the city and the state to continue working together to use all the tools at their disposal to prioritize transportation equity for New Yorkers who need it most. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Pedro Valdez Rivera, followed by Lindsay Mayer, followed by Miriam Benzman. Pedro Valdez Rivera, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Please unmute yourself, Pedro.
Sorry about that. Let me start over. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pedro Valdez Rivera, and I'm a volunteer transit advocate with the Rise Alliance. Today, as I testify about fair fares, I'm representing all the riders across NYC that the struggle day after day to afford the MetroCard. I live with my large family of residents of NYCHA in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. In my family, we all must travel to work, school, or medical appointments throughout the week. We do our own car and mostly commute by bus or train. For me, it's usually the B38 bus or the J train. I was usually using the Fairfax car until recently. Due to my boss' new job pay so higher than his last job, we no longer qualify as a household. Every penny counts in our home. Most days it's a struggle just to pay $5.50 per person just to get around. Fairfax is a great program that allows my family to save money each month that we were able to put towards rent, food, and utilities. Unfortunately, many of the neighbors right here in NYCHA don't even know the progress is. The city has done a poor job at getting the word out. Folks need to know if they qualify and how they can apply for the benefits. And also, please consider raising the eligibility to the NYC poverty line. So low-income New Yorkers, families like mine, who are still trying to recover from the pandemic, maybe above the current eligibility requirements, can have access to the help we need. Lastly, I want to ask Mayor Adams, my city council member,
Time expired.
GRC, what are your detailed outreach plans to reach every eligible rider in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. And if possible, if you could submit that in writing as well. The sound went in and out a little bit during your testimony. We want to make sure we have it all. Thank you. We will now hear from Lindsay Mayer, followed by Miriam Benzman, followed by Iman Rimawi Doster. Lindsay Mayer, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Thank you for having me today. Hello, my name is Lindsay Mayer. I'm a Riders Alliance member and a bus rider in Queens. As someone that lives in a district with bus service, but not a subway, I use the Q12 bus to reach the 7 train in Flushing. Waiting outside the bus can feel like hours during rush hour when Northern Boulevard has bumper-to-bumper traffic. Sometimes commutes that were supposed to take 1 hour ends up taking 2 due to waiting in traffic. Now is the time to redesign bus service so that strap hangers can get to their job, meeting, or home in time. We know that bus lanes and busways are a sure way to speed up buses. The Flushing busway, for example, has increased bus speed by 14%. The mayor promised 150 miles of bus lanes, and according to the New York City Streets Plan, he must put in at least 20 lanes this year. Yet he hasn't released a plan as to when and where these bus lanes will be. Council members, can I count on you to please make sure the mayor releases a comprehensive streets plan that will ensure more bus lanes will be in Queens? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Miriam Benzman, followed by Iman Rimawi Doster, followed by Karen D. Hamilton. Miriam Benzman, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time. Ms. Bensman, you have to accept the unmute request.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Miriam Bensman. I'm a resident of North Richmond Hill in Queens and a senior advisor to the Queens Link, a transit equity project that would actually expand the subway system along an existing city-owned right-of-way. The Queens Link would connect the Rockaways, Broad Channel, Howard Beach, Ozone Park, Richmond Hill, Woodhaven, and Glendale to Rego Park, and then along to Manhattan without going through Brooklyn. These communities are all transit deserts or grossly underserved. It now takes residents of the Rockaways 1 to 1.5 hours to get to Midtown Manhattan on the A train. The Queens Link would cut their trip to 45 minutes, eliminating 10 stops. The Queens Link would also provide faster routes to schools and hospitals, parks, malls, and commercial strips across Queens. It would link communities along the line to each other and to many other neighborhoods that are now inaccessible except by car and painfully slow buses. The link would use the right-of-way of the old Rockaway Beach line of the Long Island Railroad to extend the M line south from Rego Park all the way to the Rockaways. It could have stops at various points in between, connecting commercial districts, and there would be transfers to the R, J, and A lines and the air train to JFK. The city bought the right-of-way 60 years ago. It's been unused ever since, a dumping ground for mattresses and cars. Our proposal also includes building up to 33 acres of park and trail spaces alongside, underneath, or above the tracks. The
Time
MTA,
expired.
okay, just to drop. The MTA study in 2019 concluded that building this subway extension is feasible, but put a crazy high cost estimate on it. An independent study found estimated it would cost half that much using the federal guidelines. We can't afford not to do this. That's it. The rest was in my written testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. We would like to recognize that Council Member Rivera has joined. We will now hear from Iman Ramawi Doster, followed by Karen D. Hamilton, followed by Glenn Bolofsky. Iman Ramawi Doster, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, thank you so much and good afternoon. My name is Iman Ramawi Doster and I am the Accessoride Coordinator and Organizer with the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'll go as fast as I can and the rest of it I'll submit for testimony for you guys to read later. To sum it up, our transportation system remains grossly inequitable, especially for New Yorkers with disabilities. And for the millions of New Yorkers who can't easily access jobs, education, and healthcare because of the lack of affordable, efficient, and reliable transportation, we're here to talk to you about that. Accessoride has a number of chronic issues, and I'm an Accessoride user myself, and we urge the City Council to join with riders in engendering strong oversight and advocacy of the broken and dysfunctional paratransit service. We would also invite you to exercise oversight on how paratransit users have been consistently excluded from the MTA's fare discount program. As you know, the state of the subway accessibility remains dire, and the lack of elevators forces many New Yorkers, including myself, to endure Accessoride, pay for expensive taxi rides, or simply just stay home. We must increase the amount of elevator installations and set an expedited schedule for installation, a finished detectable warning system, or DWS installations, gap protections, including retractable bridge plates and sliding doors and railings. All accessible, please. Also, buses need to be more accessible. Improving accessibility for new bus loading platforms, including DWS on all edges, would benefit the blind community. Millions of New Yorkers, especially in low-income communities and communities of color, are disproportionately exposed to polluted air. And we call on the city, the state, and the MTA to make major investments now in electric vehicles, zero emission buses, paratransit vans, and school buses, while ensuring no less than 40% of them serve disadvantaged and other environmental justice communities. And I'm at time, so I will submit my testimony for y'all to read. And if you have any questions, please reach out.
I was just going to say perfect timing, but thank you so much for that testimony. That is a very important topic for me, especially out of Southeast Queens for many years, dating back to when I was a staffer in the Senate. Access-a-Ride was always a pain point for the community that relied on that mode of transportation. And even most recently, a constituent of mine indicated she retired during the pandemic because it was just too much of a burden to take Access-a-Ride to the city, where she would be losing at times 3 hours to get to her job. And so these are areas that, you know, we definitely have to focus on, and I'm looking to hear from the MTA on their plan, and you raised some valid points. And I would love to meet with you to be able to learn more on how I can be able to advocate around that space. So thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Karen D. Hamilton, followed by Glenn Belofsky, followed by Trina Quagliaroli. Karen Hamilton, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
I'm Karen Hamilton, a District 31 Queens resident and member of Riders Alliance and the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. New York City has a social compact with its residents, an implicit agreement where commuters reduce car dependency in return for safe, reliable, accessible, and affordable transit service. The compact is broken and unequitably applied, resulting in two transit realities, the transit diverse and the transit limited. Often the communities most reliant on one mode of transit are more racially and ethnically diverse and underserved by reliable service. Several areas of New York City, like my neighborhood in Southeast Queens, are not directly served by trains, have limited express bus, lack bike infrastructure, and more likely to rely on local buses for commuting. And after years of long head waits, long bus rides, waiting at desolate bus stops without shelter, and not being able to board crowded buses, residents of my community are no longer bus dependent. They're relying more on carpools, dollar vans, car services, the Long Island Railroad, and personal vehicles. Transit diversity and dependability should not be a function of income and geography. End the tale of two transit commuting realities by prioritizing safe streets infrastructure, expanding fair fares, eligibility to support all in financial need, and ensuring better buses. Successful transit projects like select bus services and the Jamaica Avenue, Archer Avenue busways must be replicated throughout the 5 boroughs, especially in bus-reliant areas. Safe, reliable, accessible, and affordable transit service is vital to New York City's economic health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now hear from Glenn Belofsky, followed by Trina Quagliaroli, followed by Erica V. DePiero. Glenn Belofsky. You may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Can you hear me?
Try speaking again.
Can you hear me?
It's a bit garbled.
All right, let's try now. How about now?
Still a little garbled.
Speak more closely. It's not a function of the computer. It's a new one. Let me speak as loudly as I can. First, we want to thank Honorable Chairwoman Selena Ambrose Powers for this important transportation equity hearing, as well as all the council members for attending, and Commissioner Rodriguez, we wish him good luck in his new role, and the DOT and DOF central staff as well. I'm here on behalf of the public, the 504 Democratic Club, the city's leading one of the city's leading disability rights clubs, and then parkingticket.com, which helps victims of unfair ticketing. especially in minority areas. We wish to emphasize that we concur with the chairwoman and strongly believe there needs to be more commuter vans and more buses that move with less congestion on our streets and less financial pain for our communities. This includes more accessorized vehicles that Iman just spoke about. Our question for Commissioner Rodriguez at now at DOT is this, and we ask Commissioner Rodriguez to please reply. Mayor Adams had communicated in writing to stop the prior administration's practice of robbing communities of essential parking for individuals with disabilities and to reduce pollution and speed the movement of buses by ending the New York City parking ticket discount programs that give unfair parking fine discounts to the largest ticket offenders. We ask, what are the plans to end these discounts so the money can be given back to the community? Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And if you could please submit that in writing, just so that we make sure we receive all of it because of the sound issues. We will now hear from Trina Quagliaroli, followed by Erica V. DiPiero. Trina Quagliaroli, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm a 20-year resident of Watt Street, just outside the entrance to the Holland Tunnel at Canal Street. I'm here to speak to the neglect of overall safety, especially pedestrian safety, in the neighborhood streets surrounding the Holland Tunnel Canal Street entrance. Over the years, pedestrians have performed a daily death-defying act of crossing at intersections of Canal, Hudson, Greenwich, Watts, and Varick streets due to a lack of basic traffic law enforcement and a common sense plan to manage vehicular traffic. We see parents weaving around cars and trucks with babies in strollers, cars driving onto medians where we're standing with our children and sidewalks, and vehicles ignoring basic laws. I do not understand why the city continues to ignore this dangerous area in one of the most heavily trafficked areas in the city. It's not some hidden corner. It is the Holland Tunnel and its surrounding areas. Can't get much more obvious. It is willful neglect from my perspective. We residents and area workers are bearing the brunt of a very dangerous traffic situation inflicted mostly by non-resident vehicles. I see changes that could improve the situation, and I know I don't have time to go through all of them. I have one specifically that I find would be most effective, and I would like to urge the city to commit to taking responsibility for this area and implement the following. It may be a bit detailed, but I will like to get it on record. And that is installing permanent lane separators on Canal Street, eastbound from West Street to 6th Avenue, to physically separate the Holland Tunnel entrance lanes from the through lane heading eastbound. This is the most important change that could impact traffic management, as is evidenced by the lane separators that were recently installed along Hudson Street.
Time expired.
I would like to urge attention to this area and ask, how do we have the DOT install these barriers alongside Canal Street? And I would like to submit a letter and would appreciate any advice on how to do that, because it seems we are very limited into what we can upload. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and someone will follow up with you on that. We will now hear from Erica V. DiPiero. Erica V. DiPiero, you may begin when the sergeant calls time.
Starting time.
Hi, my name's Erica. I'm a resident of Manhattan, and I guess I can say I volunteer with Stop the Chop organization. I've, signed their petitions, and they're the ones who let me know about today's hearing. So thanks for having this and giving us a chance to weigh in. I'm a mom to 3 school kids, so I spent a lot of time in the parks. We lived in a studio for many years, so I know some of you will know what that's like. And for the past couple of years, it's been really hard being in the parks on the weekend where we go to escape there and we have helicopters hovering over us the entire time on the weekends. And as the weather gets nicer, it will just get worse. Committee member Lee, I remember hearing you say today that you were talking about street noise. I think it was from speeding cars. I think we all agree noise is an issue, and we're used to that, right? We're New Yorkers. We're not expecting silence, but we do expect some peace when we're in our parks, for example. And I know last year there were thousands of complaints to 311. I made a few myself. And in Manhattan, where I live, many of them were logged from the Upper West Side. That's because we have a lot of traffic, commuter traffic, tourist helicopters, non-essential. So I know some of this is out of the hands of City Council, but there are a few things that I know City Council could do to make some progress and relieve us of this blight. So one would be to close down the 3 heliports to non-essential helicopters. 2 would be to ban the tourist helicopters from the downtown Manhattan heliport. And 3 would be to block the expansion of commuter helicopters. I know that there's talk of another company that wants to seek to fly from downtown to JFK. We already have those. It's just adding to the deterioration of the quality of life. So I'm asking you, please, this is an issue that affects New Yorkers in many boroughs, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for your testimony. If we have inadvertently missed anyone that is registered to testify today and has yet to have been called, please use the Zoom hand function and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. Seeing none, I will now turn it over to Chair Brooks Powers for closing remarks. Chair.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone again for attending today's hearing, especially the members of the public who waited patiently to testify. I also want to thank the Department of Transportation Commissioner for staying for the public testimony. I look forward to continuing to work together on these critical issues. Our next hearing will be a preliminary budget hearing on March 16th, where we will hear from the MTA, as well as New York City Department of Transportation and the Taxi and Limousine Commission. With that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.